Chapter 946. The energy in the yin-yang world was too dense, and it was somewhat obstructive to the movement. Even if his soul merged with the void to detect the location, it was still quite difficult to go there without alerting the enemy. At least when Yin Nuoxing carefully crept all the way, the two people were no longer at the original place. They left. Yin Nuoxing was stunned and stopped in front of a tall tree. This was the place where he had detected the two people. At this time, they had already left. There were still two pools of blood on the ground, and their aura remained. It seemed that they had just left. On the surrounding ground, there were many black marks. The strange marks seemed to be left behind by something that had been burned, which made Yin Nuoxing very puzzled. He walked to the nearest black mark and squatted down. He pinched the scorched ground with his fingers and sensed for a while. Then his expression changed slightly. This was a trace left behind by someone who had been burned to ashes by the huge amount of yang energy here, and it was all around. There were more than a dozen people around. There were also some remnants of broken weapons on the ground. Judging from their aura, they did not belong to the two people. Then they should belong to the dozen people who had died without leaving behind a body. He looked around and merged his soul power into the void again, chasing after the aura that had been artificially erased in the space, leaving behind only a very faint aura. After chasing for dozens of miles, he caught sight of the two people again. It seemed that someone was chasing them in the direction of Shao Yin. Suddenly, Yin Nuoxing's eyes trembled. He slowly stood up, looked around, and said, "Come out. You don't have to show off your little concealment skills in front of me. I can smell your aura through the void." Swoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden sound of wind breaking in the sky above this place. Then, more than a dozen people who were holding up an energy barrier suddenly appeared in front of Yin Nuoxing. This group of people was dressed in completely uniform black robes. Their whole body was wrapped up, and only a pair of eyes were exposed. They were also full of murderous intent. The whole group was like an assassin group, and even if one sensed carefully, it was difficult to sense the life aura of these people. If it were other people, they would have been ambushed. Unfortunately, Yin Nuoxing's detection was something that even high-level gods might not be able to avoid. Looking at this group of people who obviously did not come with good intentions, Yin Nuoxing twisted his neck, grabbed little purple soul from his shoulder, and hugged it in his arms. After confirming that he did not know this group of people, he said calmly, "What's the matter?" That group of people did not answer. A person who seemed to be the leader raised his chin to the person beside him and pointed at Yin Nuoxing. That person's figure suddenly disappeared. At the same time, a black shadow quietly appeared behind Yin Nuoxing. The dagger in his hand was glowing with cold light and carried a biting, cold, murderous intent, and he violently stabbed towards Yin Nuoxing. A golden light flashed in front of that person, and he was stunned. Then, in a split second, an extremely strong sense of danger rose in his heart. It was as if he was facing a life and death threat, and he immediately reacted, escape. But before he could express this thought in action, a huge force suddenly choked his neck, making him unable to breathe. That person widened his eyes in horror and lowered his gaze in disbelief. He saw Yin Nuoxing's right hand choking his neck and lifting him up high. A pair of colorful eyes revealed an indifferent and ruthless light, which made him feel cold to the bone. He did not even see how Yin Nuoxing attacked. "A killer?" Yin Nuoxing said with a faint smile. He looked around and saw that the person who seemed to be the leader seemed to be giving some orders. He could not help but smile slightly. "It seems that you won't say anything. Then go to sleep." These 3 words swept out with a chill that was enough to freeze the world. In an instant, a snowstorm suddenly blew in this place with rich yang energy. Black snowflakes fluttered and fell to the ground, freezing the ground into a solid block of black ice. When the wind blew, it left behind a trace of ice that was visible to the naked eye. This chill froze the surrounding several kilometers into ice. Looking at the dozen or so ice sculptures in front of him, Yin Nuoxing's eyes were indifferent. He casually flung the ice in his hand away, and it shattered into dozens of pieces when it hit the ground. He clapped his hands, turned around, and rushed in the direction where he had sensed the two people's auras. Boom! Boom! Violent energy surged endlessly in this place. The yang energy in this area was used as a weapon to suppress the two people from all directions. The weapons brought with them a great sense of oppression, sealing off all the escape routes of the two people. The two of them were ambushed and surrounded here. There were dozens of people, and they were all beginner god-level experts. All kinds of methods and weapons were used one after another, exhausting them to the point of exhaustion. They also had to use all their strength to resist the yang energy in this place. Under the two layers of oppression, they quickly retreated. However, the other parties seemed to have some misgivings or had some ulterior motives. They had many opportunities to kill them, but they did not. Moreover, their gazes were like a cat playing with a mouse. Well, dozens of beginner, god-level experts, even if they were all divine, venerable divine sons, besieging two demigod-level experts was like playing with a toy. However, they did not expect that these were not ordinary mice. They were as prickly as hedgehogs. They had some misgivings, so their hands were tied, and many people were killed instead. Boom! An ocean blue energy surged out from the young man's back like a raging ocean, rolling up a monstrous wave. Along with the uncontrollable yang energy, it bombarded an enemy and swept him down from the sky. The young man then struck out with his palm, intending to kill him. A sense of danger rose from his heart, causing his entire body to tremble. He hurriedly abandoned the attack in his hand, turned around, and controlled the huge wave to blast fiercely at the experts who were attacking him from behind. Every time he wanted to concentrate on killing someone, there would always be people attacking from other directions, forcing him to give up on attacking. It was as if they were wearing down his strength. They did not know how long they had been fighting. They retreated as they fought, leaving behind broken corpses. The young man and the girl's bodies were dyed red with blood. Their hair was disheveled, and they were in a sorry state. The pressure from the enemy and the yin-yang world made them tired of resisting. Seizing the moment when the young man's divine essence was empty, a person rushed forward, and the hammer in his hand smashed towards the young man with a force as heavy as Mount Tai. This hammer strike caused the young man's body to tremble, as if it was about to split open. Even his soul was trembling, and he spat out mouthfuls of blood. Borrowing this force to fly backward, he tore a godson expert in half and destroyed his soul. Little hedgehog, how troublesome. When you fall in my hands, I will torture you ruthlessly and pull out your souls. When the group of people in black saw another companion fall, their cheeks trembled slightly. Their voices seemed to come from the underworld, incomparably cold. The young man coughed out large mouthfuls of blood as he flew backward. The girl hurriedly got rid of her opponent and came in front of him in a flash, catching him. Looking at his appearance, she frowned and gritted her teeth. Cough! The young man coughed out a mouthful of blood, dyeing his clothes red. His eyes became colder and colder, but when he looked at the girl, he was slightly gentle. He reached out and pushed her behind him. Sister, don't worry about me. Let's rush out. I have a way to escape. If you really have that kind of power, we would have run away long ago. The girl, Mei Mao, glanced at him. Knowing his temperament, she exposed him without hesitation. A touch of embarrassment flashed across the young man's face. He had just been ambushed and didn't die. Then, he killed a divine sun expert. He had already used up all his strength. At this time, the special barrier to resist the yin-yang world was still supported by the girl. He really didn't have any strength left. The energy in the yin-yang world is chaotic. You can't escape anymore. Even the barrier can't last for 5 minutes. Come back with us obediently, and you can still live. The person who seemed to be the leader walked out and sneered. Bah, if I go back with you, I'll be completely finished. The young man fiercely spat before he let out a cold laugh. Then he extended his blood-stained middle finger at the leader. His eyes were sharp as he said, Even if I die in battle and perish together with all of you, I will never let you succeed. In that case, the leader's eyes gradually turned gloomy, and he waved his arm. Then you'd better go together. If you want to blame someone, blame your own birth. A storm of energy burst out from the bodies of the dozens of god masters, triggering the energy of the yin-yang world. The energy that was not supposed to be used by humans condensed into a violent energy storm, which fell from the sky. The violent power made the two of them turn paler. The energy that was as hot as the sun was rapidly magnified in their eyes. The hot wind that came toward them seemed to set them on fire. The oppressive feeling almost tore their bodies apart. The young man, who had no other means, gritted his teeth, turned his back to the energy that was as hot as the sun, and hugged the girl into his arms. Ignoring her screams, he closed his eyes tightly. Click! There was a crisp snap of fingers. Perhaps it was a snap of fingers. The sound was too subtle, but it was inexplicably profound. This strange sound instantly spread to everyone's ears, and everyone was stunned. The leader and the others turned around in astonishment. Before they saw anything, their bodies became stiff in an instant, and their consciousnesses disappeared into the depths of the ice in an instant. It was as if the hot summer sun had entered a cold winter in an instant. The biting cold made the young man, who closed his eyes and waited for death, shiver violently. The girl in his arms also shivered. She opened Mei Mao's eyes wide and looked behind him. The violent energy that was as hot as the sun was now completely fixed in the space. The ice had perfectly preserved the appearance of the energy, and it was fixed in the space like a piece of art with a black luster. The energy contained in the ice that was close to her made her shiver, and she hurriedly pulled the young man back for a distance. The young man also felt that something was wrong at this time. He hurriedly turned around and saw a huge black ice block that was hundreds of feet long, standing in front of him like a huge iceberg. He was so shocked that his snot flowed out. Ignoring the pain all over his body, he hurriedly looked around, but he didn't see the group of god experts. He couldn't help but be stunned. "Sis, does this count as saving us?" The young man pinched his thigh, and the pain made him suck in a breath of cold air. Only then did he realize that it wasn't a dream, and he couldn't help but ask. The girl also shook her head in a daze. After a while, she came back to her senses. After discovering that it wasn't an illusion, she also heaved a sigh of relief. She raised her head and threw Mei Mao at the energy ice sculpture that had been turned into ice. The person there didn't hide his figure. He raised his hand with difficulty and clasped his fist to the top, saying, "Thank you for saving my life." Seeing that the other party had discovered her, of course, it was also because she didn't deliberately hide. Yun Nuoxing jumped down from the black iceberg and descended from the sky with several layers of energy barriers. Those layers of energy barriers immediately enveloped the two of them. The energy barriers that were already on the verge of collapse directly dissipated under the stronger impact. Both of them were stunned. As soon as they reacted, they felt an unprecedented sense of relief. When they looked back, they saw several layers of powerful and complicated energy barriers that completely blocked the influence of the yin-yang world on them. They immediately heaved a sigh of relief. This is purely relying on strength to resist the yin-yang world. This person can't be underestimated. I don't know if he's an enemy or a friend. We'd better be careful. The siblings looked at each other, and some information currents that others couldn't understand flowed through their eyes. In just a glance, the two of them exchanged such thoughts. However, they still felt relieved for the time being. Only then did they turn their heads to look at Yun Nuoxing. When they saw Yun Nuoxing like this, they couldn't help but be stunned. It had to be said that Yun Nuoxing's image at this time was too confusing. Anyone who saw her at first glance would exclaim in admiration, "What a beautiful little sister that could topple a country." It was just a little strange that she was carrying a little girl on her shoulder. It was also because of Yun Nuoxing's appearance that the siblings let down their guard a little. However, there was still a trace of doubt in their hearts. When did this monster appear in the Koan Yuan region? Why didn't they know about it? Can you still move? Yun Nuoxing glanced at the two of them, blinked her eyes, and revealed a faint smile. She folded her hands in front of her and said, "This is not the place to talk. If you can still move, follow me. If you can't move, just blink twice. I'll take you to a place where no one can get close to." The siblings were stunned. They looked at each other, and then blinked hard at Yin Nuashing. Seeing that the two of them were blinking their eyes, Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched. She nodded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. With a wave of her hand, gentle water elements gushed out from her body, forming a huge bubble that wrapped the two of them. Then, with a flash of golden light, the two of them disappeared. Thank you for saving us, Fairy. My name is Gu Chun, and this is my sister, Fairy Gu. May I know your name? The young man cupped his hands and smiled. He kept looking at Yun Nuashing, hoping to find some unique characteristics. A person with such strength should not be an ordinary person. Yun Nuashing looked deeply at the young man for a long time, until the two of them had goosebumps. Then, she sighed and said, My surname is Yun, and I'm a man. The two of them were horrified, and they looked at her in horror. Little Purple Soul continued to grab Yin Nuashing's long hair. She could not help but mutter, Brother looks so much like sister. I've been mistaken for him so many times. The two of them were even more horrified. At first, the Gu siblings wanted to tell Yin Nuashing not to run outside, but when they saw that he was going deeper and deeper into the energy tide, they felt a little uneasy. They wanted to say something, but the sense of security that those few layers of barriers gave them was too strong, so they couldn't find an entry point even if they wanted to say something. Helpless, they could only shut their mouths and curl up in the bubble that Yin Nuashing made, following him into the energy tide. Yin Nuashing was used to hiding his identity, so he did not use the light element. However, his body was strengthened by the light element all year round. Even if he did not use the light element, his speed was many times faster than people of the same level. Therefore, it did not take him too long to reach the little Een Lake. Sitting cross-legged in front of the Een Lake, Gu Chun rubbed his sore shoulders. He looked at Yun Nuashing, who was standing in front of the Een Lake, thinking about something. Gu Chun rolled his eyes and suddenly said, Brother Yun, were you sent here by someone? Are you secretly protecting us? Hearing this, the fairy also turned her gaze. It was obvious that she was also very concerned about this matter. Why do you think so? Yin Nuashing tilted his head and looked at the two of them, asking. Gu Chun scratched his head and laughed dryly. Because it's too timely. Moreover, we have never met Brother Yin before. Yin Nuashing was speechless. Because they had never met, did they think that he would not save them? Well, under normal circumstances, it was not a problem to think that way. If he did not feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity from the two of them, he would not have bothered to save them. Being hunted down and killed was something that happened every day in the God realm. It was impossible for him to save everyone. He did not have that kind of free time, nor did he have the heart of a saint. After looking at Gu Chun indifferently for a while, Yin Nuashing shook his head lightly. I was inexplicably surrounded by that group of people and suffered a round of assassination attempts. When I heard them mention the two of you, I was a little curious, so I chased after you. So who were those people? Enemies, perhaps. Gu Chun smiled bitterly. He cupped his fists at Yin Nuashing and said, Anyway, thank you so much, Brother Yin. I'm really sorry to have involved you in this. It's nothing. I only saved you because I wanted to know who these bastards were who attacked indiscriminately and tried to silence us. However, it seems that you have your own difficulties, so let's forget about it. Yin Nuashing waved his hand, looking as if he did not care. Gu Chun breathed a sigh of relief. If Yin Nuashing continued to ask, no matter how he looked at it, it would not be easy for him to hide it. Moreover, even if you tell me, I may not have heard of them. I am not from the Kuan Yuan region, so I don't know much about the forces in the Kuan Yuan region. Yin Nuashing shook his head. Just as he was about to urge them to recover quickly, the ancient fairy interrupted him. The people from the Lingyun battle court, if I'm not wrong, their fighting styles are very similar. The ancient fairy said softly, They are a very famous first-rate force in the northeast region of the Kuan Yuan region. They have always been at odds with the forces we belong to. They have been at war with us for many years. Elder sister, Gu Chun smiled bitterly. He nudged the ancient fairy with his elbow and sent her a message with his eyes without batting an eyelid. Yin Nuashing looked at her with surprise. He waited for her to finish before he smiled and said, Look, Even if you tell me, I wouldn't know about it. I've never heard of it before. It's the Lingyun Battle Court. Therefore, compared to who they are and where you come from, I'm more curious about what you are doing here. It seems that you're not completely forced to come here, right? Yin Nuashing said casually with a faint smile. Whether it was the people from the Lingyun Battle Court or the siblings, they all had simple methods to offset the power of the energy tide in the yin-yang world to the greatest extent. It was obvious that they came prepared. He did not believe that they came here simply because they were hunted down. However, he was just curious. When Zian and the others were cultivating, he could only come out to find something to do to pass the time. Chapter 9:47. Inside the Yin Lake, energy surged as monstrous waves rose several thousand feet into the air, forming a huge wall of water. The thick layer of energy clouds in the sky also fell down like a funnel. The yin and yang energies that were originally repelling each other in the sky were accurately divided into two by a force of energy. The yang energy was repelled, while the yin energy fell to the ground without any reservation. It was like the scene of the sea and the sky surging. Endless yin energy gathered from all directions, creating a cold whirlwind. The cold yin energy caused the space to crackle as ice crystals condensed and gathered along with the storm. On the lakeside, Yun Nuashing's hands danced as if she was controlling the cold whirlwind. She clapped her hands together and changed her hand seals from time to time. Every time her hand seals changed, the gathered energy would be fiercely squeezed towards the center by a huge force. Then, she controlled the energy that was rushing over from afar to gather and compress it again. After this cycle repeated dozens of times, the storm showed signs of weakening. Condense. A soft shout from a lakeside caused the gradually weakening storm to dissipate. An extremely strong pressure with the power to collapse space crazily squeezed towards the center of the storm. Under that huge pressure, the ball of condensed energy that had been compressed dozens of times began to tremble violently. Powerful energy shock waves burst out from the ball of chaotic energy, causing waves of several hundred feet tall to surge towards the lakeside. However, the wall of water that was close to Yun Nuashing's lakeside quietly collapsed when it was only 100 meters away. It fell back into the lake, creating countless splashes of cold yin energy, and mist covered the lakeside. Ding! Following an extremely clear sound, like the sound of a sword gently piercing a gem, Yun Nuashing's hand seals dissipated, and the shock waves also dissipated. In the center of the Yin Lake, the ball of chaotic energy had already disappeared. What appeared there was a pale white diamond-shaped crystal that was about a foot tall. Yun Nuashing waved his hand and took the pale white crystal into his hand. His colorful eyes stared at it for a while, and he nodded in satisfaction when he felt the pure yin energy. He waved his hand and put it away. This energy crystal had condensed extremely pure yin energy. He had used pure energy to compress it into a crystal form, and it was used as an attachment for tracking the Azure Dragon's aura. In other words, it was a carrier. However, without the ability of the spirit receiving divine body to compress the energy, it's a bit difficult. Yun Nuashing squeezed his palms and felt that his energy was severely depleted. He shook his head helplessly. The ability of the spirit receiving divine body had been weakened by nearly 80% after the Tree of Divinity was separated. He could feel that his control over the energy had obviously weakened. He turned his head and saw the ancient fairy and Gu Chun staring at him in shock. He couldn't help but be stunned. He scratched his head and asked, "What's wrong?" A puzzled voice made the siblings shiver. They quickly came back to their senses, and then they put their heads together. Gu Chun whispered, "Sister, this person is so dangerous. He's really dangerous. I've never seen anyone compress energy in such a messy way, not even the high-level gods at home." The ancient fairy nodded her head with deep feelings. The way Yun Nuashing compressed energy looked quite dangerous. If it were someone else who didn't compress the energy bit by bit when they were outside the body. Yun Nuashing, on the other hand, threw large lumps of energy inside the body. The way the energy was surging just now was as if it wanted to overturn the sky. It was simply too messy. However, Yin Nuashing had succeeded. To the two of them, this was simply a ridiculous method. The former, however, did not think much of it. It was not the first time he had done this, and he had never failed. That kind of energy compression bit by bit was too much of a waste of time. Seeing the siblings whispering something, Yin Nuashing shook his head helplessly. It had been more than half a day since he rescued them. Little Purple Soul was sleeping on his shoulder. The two of them had not recovered to their peak state, but their basic movements were not hindered. They could also support the barrier that was strong enough to withstand the energy tide with their demigod strength. Seeing that the two of them were in a hurry, Yin Nuashing couldn't tell them to rest for a while. He hung them in a water bubble on his back and left the Yin Lake. "We can't be out for too long this time. Dad and Mom are keeping a close eye on us." Gu Chan scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "After entering the Yin-Yang world, we were accidentally caught by those people from the Ling Yun battle court. We wasted a lot of time fighting, so we don't have time to waste. Although we haven't recovered to our peak state, we can still protect ourselves even in the face of gods." Yin Nuashing responded casually. He took the two of them and flew quickly through the energy tide. He looked around and said, "What does the thing you were looking for look like?" "The fruit of the flaming sun tree on the yang side of the yin-yang world. It has the effect of nurturing and releasing potential. It can be used to refine a kind of peerless elixir. Even our family spent a lot of money to find out where this thing is in the yin-yang world. Brother Yin, if you help us find it, we can give you some," Gu Chun said with a smile. Fairy Gu looked at her stupid brother, who couldn't keep his mouth shut, and shook his head helplessly. Mei Mao looked at Yin Nuashing casually, blinked, and said nothing. "Hey, you said it so bluntly. Aren't you afraid that I'll leave you and take it for myself?" Yin Nuashing turned his head and smiled faintly, joking. Hearing this, Gu Chun shook his head calmly and said, "Brother Yun is our savior. If Brother Yun wants to take it for himself, we won't say anything. Just take it as a gift. It's just a small token of our respect." Seeing that his eyes were clear and didn't look like he was lying, Yin Nuashing looked at him for a while and said faintly, "Well, I'm not that bad. After all, it's your information." Hearing this, Gu Chin smiled and gave his sister a thumbs up. He threw a look that said, "I knew Brother Yin wasn't that kind of person." Fairy Gu rolled her eyes in annoyance. Mei Mao looked at Yin Nuashing with some light in her eyes. She wanted to say something, but she hesitated and didn't say anything. She could only sigh in her heart. This person looks like a girl. He shouldn't have any bad intentions. Yin Nuashing didn't know what they were thinking. He helped them find the flaming sun tree just to pass the time. He had heard of the flaming sun fruit before. It could nurture one's potential. Something like potential would be used up one day. By then, if one didn't encounter any opportunities, it might be the same for the rest of one's life. There were some spiritual items in the world that had the miraculous effect of nurturing one's potential. The flaming sun fruit was one of the top ones. Moreover, the flaming sun fruit could maximize one's potential. It was extremely effective for experts at the beginner god level. Even if a high-level god ate it, it would have a good effect. "Well, although I know this thing," Yin Nuashing murmured in his heart. Although the flaming sun fruit was good, he didn't care for it. He didn't lack this kind of item. Out of 10 fairy items that he had, 8 out of 10 of them were related to potential. It was just that their effects were different. Moreover, they were real fairy items. In terms of nurturing potential, they were more effective than elixirs made with thousands of medicinal herbs and flaming sun fruit. As for those fairy items that only had the effect of nurturing potential, they were even more exaggerated. Before Bing Air hatched, Yin Nuashing had refined many of them and fused them into her egg. Yin Nuashing quickly flew through the energy tide without looking around. His soul force was immersed in the void, constantly probing for places with dense yang energy. Although there was an extremely dense yang energy reaction in the surroundings, the flaming sun tree and flaming sun fruit were nurtured with yang energy, so they would condense more energy. Therefore, there should be a place with a high energy reaction, even if it was in a shallow layer of the energy tide. As his soul force spread toward a certain place, Yin Nuashing suddenly sent back a message, causing him to turn his head and look at that place through the energy fog. His gaze became somewhat interesting, and he couldn't help but laugh. "What's wrong?" Guchen asked. "Nothing. I think I found the flaming sun tree you were talking about, but..." Yin Nuoxing's figure hovered in the air, his windbreaker flapping from his own energy. He pointed at a place and said, "There seems to be quite a few people gathered there, the shallow layer of the energy tide." Gu Chun and Fairy Gu's expressions froze, and they looked at each other in disbelief. Gu Chun couldn't help but ask, "Someone beat us to it? But wasn't that place said to be very dangerous, and no one went there?" Yin Nuoxing shrugged, indicating that he didn't know. But after a moment, he asked, "When did you receive that message?" "About a year ago." Gu Chun was puzzled. "Oh, the yin-yang sky opens once a year. Usually, the energy tide will completely cover the yin-yang sky, and it won't recede until this time every year. But every time it opens, the receding point and direction are different. Maybe the dangerous place this year won't be dangerous the next time it opens." Yin Nuoxing seemed to understand something. Gu Chen's eyes widened, and Fairy Gu's red lips twitched. "That means the message has expired. Who told you not to use it while it was still fresh?" Yin Nuoxing looked at the two helplessly. This was the first time he had seen someone miss a good opportunity because the message had expired. How should he put it? He felt a little sympathetic. "It's not like we don't have a chance." Fairy Gu pondered for a while, then looked at Yin Nuoxing and said softly, "I don't remember what the message said after that, but it seems to mean that even if we know the place, it won't be that easy to get it. Probably a trial. I just saw it at Luoyang Lake, and there was a peak sun of God Guardian. This place is probably the same," Yin Nuoxing said casually. "Peak sun of God." Gu Chun and Fairy Gu looked at each other and fell silent. A peak son of God was a little tricky. Even if the two of them joined forces, it would take a lot of effort to defeat it. It would be fine if there was no one around, but if there were a lot of people gathered there, as Yin Nuoxing said, it would be troublesome. Someone might take advantage of their weakness to attack. Seeing the siblings' flickering eyes, Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly, waved his hand, and said, "Anyway, let's go and take a look first." Fairy Gu and Gu Chen nodded. They could only go and take a look before making a decision. With Yin Nuoxing's speed, he brought the two of them to the place he had just sensed in a few minutes. What appeared in front of them was a mountain range. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Wasn't this mountain range the Serpentine Mountain Range that separated the two regions? It was thousands of feet tall. Two kinds of rich energy converged in this mountain range, and there was a dragon vein underground that spewed out dragon's breath. The three kinds of energy converged here, forming a silvery white energy that spread throughout the entire mountain range like a burning flame. This mountain range should be very dangerous. It was even more dangerous than the energy tides on both sides of the mountain range. It was almost like the Yin Lake and the Yang Lake were flowing in reverse here. The energy collided crazily, and the monstrous energy flames burned fiercely. The dragon's breath was like a catalyst that made the Yin and Yang energies burn even more crazily. Even though it was just the energy form of a flame, one would feel an inexplicable burning sensation at a glance. Yin Nuoxing's eyes were sharp, and he soon found the place where many people were gathered. In a part of the mountain range, the energy flames were a little weak. It was close to the edge of the mountain range, and in the shallow region of the energy tides, the flames seemed to be suppressed, and a miraculous calm region appeared. On the mountain range, in the calm region, there was a naturally formed platform. It was a little bumpy, and the gap between the left and right sides of the platform was about 10 meters. It was not just a slope. The silvery white flames surrounded the platform and did not spread into it. In the middle of the platform, there was a forest, a pale white forest, and a fiery red forest. On this side of the mountain range, there was a fiery red forest, and on the other side of the mountain range, there was a pale white forest. There was a clear dividing line. On both sides of the platform, there were two very spacious mountain paths and small platforms. They were obviously man-made. Many people gathered on the small platforms. The two spacious mountain paths extended from the small platforms to the forest at the top of the mountain. There were about 20 people gathered on the small platforms. Including the platform on the other side of the moon, there were about 50 people in total. These 50 people were all blocked in front of the mountain path. At the junction of the platform and the mountain path, there was a spear-like figure. The protector on the moon side was 2 meters tall. He wore a pale white metal armor that was extremely thick and heavy. He held a silver-white spear in his hand, and his entire body was suffused with a metallic luster. The protector on the sun side was about the same, but his armor was fiery red like the sun. It was very dazzling, and just looking at it made one's eyes heat up and feel irritated. So that's how it is. It's the brand of rule. These guardians are all experts who once appeared in the yin-yang world. Their strength is remembered by the rules of this special place. Once someone wants to enter those core areas, the rules of heaven and earth will transform into a guardian through the brand of rule to prevent those who are not strong enough from entering. Looking at the guardian, Yun Nuoxing suddenly realized that those guardians were formed by the spontaneous power of the rules of this world. Is it very powerful? Guchen asked quickly. It was their first time in the yin-yang world. They only came for the sun flame fruit, so they didn't know anything. Yun Nuoxing pondered for a while and said, "The brand of rule records the strength of the expert who once appeared here. How powerful the expert used to be is the limit of his strength. There will also be a corresponding guardian for the corresponding realm. You can use various methods to pass through. Well, if you are stronger than the guardian, you can directly push through. Anyway, let's go down first. It seems that we can't pass through from the sky." Yun Nuoxing hugged little purple soul in his arms and said to the two of them. Then he quickly fell down. The rapid sound of rushing wind caused everyone on the platform to be startled. Numerous gazes swept across the surroundings, and soon after, they saw Yun Nuoxing and the other two descend like divine soldiers from the heavens. Those gazes were all shocked. Quite a number of people here had entered the Water Cloud Pavilion before and naturally knew of Yun Nuoxing. However, they did not know of the two people behind him and did not pay too much attention to them. After all, there were only 3 demigods. This was also because they didn't know what happened at Little Yang Lake. If they knew, no one would think so. Yun Nuoxing was too lazy to care about what everyone was thinking. At this moment, the fiery red guardian was fighting with someone. If not, he would have rushed up long ago. He did not like to wait for too long. He would wake up after spending a little time to see the situation clearly. It would be a waste of time to continue waiting, especially when there were so many people around. The 3 of them glanced around. Yun Nuoxing was bored, while Ancient Fairy and her brother were looking at these people who might be their opponents and paying more attention. There are many people worthy of your attention. Well, to me, they're not a threat at all. Yun Nuoxing faintly transmitted his voice to the 2 of them and pointed at the person standing in front with his eyes. That was a divine venerable expert, and he was very close to becoming a divine king. Ancient Fairy and her brother smiled bitterly. Yun Nuoxing said again, "When this person is done fighting, we will go up. Just follow behind me. Don't get too close, or you will be affected by my attack. Well, I will try my best to control it. I just want to remind you." The 2 of them smiled bitterly again. The guardian didn't look so simple. The 2 of them hadn't recovered to their peak state at this time, so it would be difficult for them to defeat him. Bang! While the 3 of them were talking, a dull sound came from the platform. Then everyone saw a figure spitting out blood and flying backward. Yun Nuoxing's eyes glanced at the person until he fell to the ground. He looked at the person who was covered in blood and was deep in thought. That person was a 4th transformation divine son, while the guardian was close to the divine venerable level. There was about a difference of 4 or 5 small realms. After thinking for a while, Yun Nuoxing suddenly came back to his senses and quickly waved his hand to bring Ancient Fairy and her brother up. However, the divine venerable expert directly stepped forward and entered the guardian's attack range. Yun Nuoxing's face twitched, and he smiled bitterly. Anyway, he was late. Line up. Line up. When the divine venerable expert stepped forward, many people here became alert. In fact, many of them had already been eliminated. It was just that Yun Nuoxing hadn't come at that time, so they didn't know. When the divine venerable expert walked in front of the guardian, The red figure, who was originally a 8th transformation divine son, had a strong light in his eyes. His aura suddenly surged, and in a few breaths he surpassed the divine venerable expert. Moreover, he steadily surpassed the divine venerable expert by a few small realms before stopping. The divine venerable expert couldn't help but smile bitterly when he saw such an aura. People who weren't good at fighting beyond their realms wouldn't be able to pass this stage. However, he had already walked out, so he could only brace himself and face it. Boom! When the divine venerable expert was ready, the guardian's eyes lit up. He stomped his feet on the ground, and his huge body rushed straight in front of the divine venerable expert. A fist the size of a cattail, Hasek smashed down with terrifying aura and yang energy. That speed made the divine venerable expert's expression freeze. He had been observing for a long time, but when it was his turn, the guardian's strength had increased by a few notches. It wasn't as simple as he had seen before, and the battle he had observed earlier was no longer of any value. The divine venerable expert roared. Since there was no trick, he would meet force with force. He didn't choose to dodge. Instead, he gathered his aura and punched out, colliding with the guardian's ferocious attack. Boom! Another loud sound was heard. A weak energy storm erupted from the two disproportionate fists and swept out. Then, everyone saw the divine venerable expert's face turn pale as he was sent flying. He spat out mouthfuls of blood before finally landing heavily on the ground with a pale face. All right, let's go. Yin Nuoxing wasn't surprised to see the divine venerable expert defeated in one blow. She tilted her head and smiled at the ancient fairy duo, then walked straight towards the guardian. Before the siblings could react, they saw Yin Nuoxing already in front of the guardian. Their faces turned bitter, but waiting was not a solution. They could only grit their teeth and quickly followed. Chapter 948. As Yin Nuoxing stepped into the guardian's attack range, the red figure slowly raised its head. Its crimson eyes flashed as it glanced at Yin Nuoxing, then looked at the two fairy Guchun and Guchun. After a while, its godly king-level aura dropped rapidly. Within a few breaths, it had dropped to the level of Son of God. It was probably around the Son of God's 7th transformation, which was stronger than Yin Nuoxing had expected. Perhaps it was because it had two people with it. Brother Yin, is this really okay? Why don't you wait for us to recover? Guchun looked at the guardian's crimson eyes and felt his scalp go numb. Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly, indicating that there was no need to worry. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he walked to a place less than 10 meters away from the guardian. This distance was close enough for a god master to touch his face. His attack could instantly cross this distance and reach the enemy's face. Bang! The moment he approached, the red figure suddenly disappeared, and a crater appeared where it had been. Not even an afterimage could be seen in the space. With just a flash, Yin Nuoxing felt a strong gust of wind blowing at his face, causing his long hair and windbreaker to flutter. In the next moment, he saw the huge figure swinging its fist at him. The strong gust of wind contained in the fist caused the space to tremble slightly. Yin Nuoxing's eyes were strengthened by the evil spirit eye and the eye of the ocean. He could even barely capture objects moving at the speed of light. This speed could be seen as slow motion. Therefore, the moment the fist appeared, his right thumb and middle finger quickly stuck together, and then he rubbed them gently. Ka! A crisp snap of the finger caused a faint ripple to appear in space. The sound that followed was the sound of the entire space freezing into a piece. In this place where the yang energy was vigorous and hot, a beautiful ice sculpture suddenly appeared on the spot. It was like an ice sculpture. The black ice sculpture bloomed half a meter in front of Yin Nuoxing, freezing the red guardian together with it. Everything suddenly quieted down, and everyone gasped. No one saw how Yin Nuoxing attacked. Even when they felt the energy fluctuation, the attack had already taken shape. No, it had already ended. There's nothing that can't be solved with a snap of the fingers. Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and smiled faintly at the ancient fairy and her brother, who were dumbfounded. The light element was so abnormal, especially when it was integrated into the performance of other mysterious techniques. The enemy could only feel that all his attacks were instantaneous, catching them off guard and impossible to defend against. Seeing that the guardian had been frozen inside, Yin Nuashing waved his hand to beckon the ancient fairy and her brother, and then he walked forward. The people on the platform behind him had strange looks on their faces. No one had ever passed through this checkpoint before. Those who were gathered here were all experts of the younger generation of the Kuan Yuan region. Even they couldn't pass through it. Moreover, when they saw that others couldn't pass through it, they felt relieved. However, when they saw that someone had led two other people to pass through it easily, their gazes became strange. Could it be that it was actually very simple? Crack! When Yin Nuashing led the ancient fairy and her brother out for a distance and was about to ascend the mountain path, a soft sound suddenly came from behind them, causing them to prick up their ears. This sound was like the sound of ice shattering, as if something was about to break out of the ice. Bang! The sudden explosion of the ice cube caused a large amount of cold air to erupt on the spot. Black energy was exposed in the air. A bright red figure skillfully crossed through the air. His body was pulled into an afterimage, which was blurry. His aura had also soared by a few times within a breath's time. His strength had also leaped by a few levels. The breaking of the mysterious darkness ice caused Yin Nuashing's expression to become sluggish. He abruptly turned his head around and saw the enormous figure cutting through the sound barrier like a cannonball as it rushed towards him. The long spear in his hand surged with a hot, fiery red energy. From a great distance away, the long spear was shot out. A bright red flame was like a spear wind as it carried an extremely hot energy as it rushed over. "Brother Yin, be careful." Gu Chen turned pale with fright and hurriedly shouted. A black light flashed across Yin Nuashing's eyes. The speed of the fiery red spear was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had rushed in front of him and released an incomparably blazing energy towards him. Dark, mysterious ice. He let out a low shout, and his right hand snapped again. This time, it was not an ice sculpture that suddenly appeared. Everyone only felt that time seemed to slow down several times in their line of sight. The speed of the fiery red spear that was rapidly flashing suddenly slowed down, and its movement was visible to the naked eye. Then, an energy wave surged out from Yin Nuashing's body. When the fiery red spear came into contact with the extremely cold energy wave, it suddenly trembled. Then, a wisp of black cold light appeared from the tip of the spear and gradually moved towards its body. Under everyone's gaze, the fiery red spear slowly froze and turned into an energy ice sculpture. The scarlet guardian that swung the spear still had a stern expression on its face, but the extremely cold energy that followed the spear had already touched its spear and turned it into ice. Then the extremely cold energy continued to move up the spear and froze its right hand, followed by its body. The energy that spread out from its body gradually froze the space, as though the ice was spreading out from its body. In the end, its entire figure was swallowed by the ice and disappeared into the pitch-black ice. Even its energy was annihilated. Crack! The sound of ice freezing was heard as expected, and the slow-motion scene returned to normal in an instant. The whole process was definitely shorter than half a second. In an instant, everyone saw a huge ice sculpture in front of Yin Nuashing, less than 3 villages away. The ice sculpture seemed to be pointing a spear at her. The biting cold made everyone shiver. Her eyes gradually became calm. Yin Nuashing heaved a sigh of relief, turned around, and walked away. She snapped her fingers and said with a smile, "If one time isn't enough, let's do it twice." Both fairy and fairy heaved a sigh of relief. Everything happened too quickly, and they couldn't react at all. By the time they were about to make a move, the spear was already close to Yin Nuashing. Fortunately, the latter's strength was far beyond their imagination. It seemed like they were worried for nothing. Now that there shouldn't be any obstruction, the 3 of them stepped onto the mountain path calmly. Halfway through, Yin Nuashing suddenly turned her head with a strange expression. She stared at the black ice sculpture and said, "Did we really pass it this time? Don't tell me it came back to life." Both fairy and fairy were stunned. They also turned around and looked at the ice sculpture. They looked at it vigilantly for a while, then pulled Yin Nuoxing back carefully. Their movements were somewhat comical. They were very careful and retreated step by step. Their eyes were fixed on the black ice sculpture, as if they were afraid that the thing inside would suddenly appear and attack them. However, they had already been ambushed once, so it was fine to be careful. Fortunately, until Yin Nuoxing and the others reached the end of the mountain path and stepped onto the platform at the top of the mountain, the ice sculpture didn't move at all. When Yin Nuoxing, who was walking behind them, stepped onto the platform, the ice sculpture suddenly shattered. Then, under everyone's bitter gazes, it turned around and faced the people on the small platform. It stomped the ground with its spear, and the mountain shook. The force made everyone tremble. Seeing that everything was fine, the three of them heaved a sigh of relief. Then they turned around and saw the flaming yang trees in front of them. Their eyes lit up. Guchen was so excited that he jumped up and said, "Flaming yang trees. Flaming yang fruits. We finally got to see them. Wow, the fruits here are so fragrant. They should be delicious. Brother, go and pick some. Go and pick some." Little Purple Soul woke up just in time. As soon as she woke up, she saw the fiery red forest and the huge fruits hanging under the trees. She immediately raised her eyebrows, and her gem-like eyes flashed. She quickly pulled Yin Nuoxing's head with both hands. Yin Nuoxing let out a bitter laugh and nodded. Before the girl could pull his head off, he quickly ran to a tree and jumped up to grab the fiery red fruit. Just as he was about to use his strength to gently pluck it, his expression changed. With his weak strength, he could not pluck the fruit. When he touched it, it was as if he had grabbed a ball of fire. Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. The temperature was nothing to him. He frowned and let out a soft groan. He pulled hard, and the fruit that was half the size of a fist fell to the ground. After plucking the fruit, he felt that his energy seemed to have decreased a little. So that's how it is. Yin Nuoxing suddenly realized that it wasn't the kind that could be plucked at will. There were some restrictions. What happened next would depend on how much energy he had left. However, he wasn't worried about that at all. Little Purple Soul happily took the flaming sun fruit from Yin Nuoxing's shoulder. The hot temperature didn't affect her at all. She held the fruit in her hand and looked at it for a while. Then, she opened her mouth and took a small bite. "Wait, Brother Yun." Gu Chun gasped when he saw Little Purple Soul taking a bite of the fruit without hesitation. He was sad that the flaming sun fruit was eaten so easily, but he was also shocked that she dared to take a bite of the flaming sun fruit. The temperature of the fruit was equivalent to the fire elemental energy condensed by some supreme gods and godly kings. However, just as he shouted, he saw Little Purple Soul chewing the fruit gently. After a while, she swallowed it. Her little face lit up with joy, and her little legs that were resting on Yin Nuoxing's shoulder couldn't help but shake. The fairy Gu was relatively calm. She looked at Little Purple Soul for a while. She didn't find anything strange about her, so she said, "It seems that this little girl isn't an ordinary person either." Yin Nuoxing nodded and stretched out his hand to stroke this girl's head. He said, "This girl is a little mysterious. She seems to have absolute disregard for low-level energy. Well, I discovered it by accident. It seems that even God Underworld strong practitioners can't hurt her at all. When the energy of gods and deities acts on her body, no matter if it's positive or negative, the effect is extremely low. Even if it's a God Emperor strong practitioner, it's not that easy to affect her." This was the result of his research after staying in the Nine Gods Temple for a while. He originally wanted to cleanse Little Purple Soul's marrow and refine her little body, but he didn't expect that ordinary medicine would be almost useless. The power of the fairy in her soul seemed to block most of the energy that acted on her, no matter if it was positive or negative. Only when Yin Nuoxing threw out a fairy item could it be effective. However, it didn't seem obvious. The Golden Empress had also tried it herself. Her power could only affect Little Purple Soul to a very limited extent. Combined with the fact that this little girl hadn't grown up for more than 10 years and still had the temperament of a child, everyone had a very scary guess in their hearts. Of course, some of their guesses were very unreliable. Anyway, this little girl was very mysterious. She was even more mysterious than Yun Nuashing. At least everyone knew about the things on Yun Nuashing's body. These things could be pointed out and explained. However, Little Purple Soul's body was even more mysterious than Little Purple Soul. Even Temple Master Guang couldn't understand it. Ning Qinxue couldn't understand it either. In the end, she could only give up. Then, she came up with an immunity property. The immunity included both positive and negative effects. No one knew if it was good or bad. Perhaps it was because of this property that Little Purple Soul was tainted with fairy qi. Well, let's not talk about this. Yun Nuashing shook her head when she saw the two people's curious and doubtful gazes. She looked at Little Purple Soul who was talking about her and let out a sigh of relief. She said, "You need energy to harvest the sun fruit. Try to harvest as much as you can." Gu Chan came back to his senses and remembered why he came here. He quickly nodded and thanked Yun Nuashing. Then, he pulled a fairy Gu and rushed out. "Brother, brother." Little Purple Soul called out softly. She passed the half-eaten sun fruit to Yun Nuashing. She licked the juice on the corner of her mouth and smiled innocently. "What's wrong? Doesn't taste good?" Yun Nuashing took the fruit and asked with her head tilted. Little Purple Soul shook her head and said, "No, it's quite good. It's much better than the one I had yesterday. I want to leave some for brother." Yun Nuashing was stunned for a moment. Then, she smiled and felt warmth in her heart. She rubbed the little girl's long purple hair and passed the sun fruit to her. She smiled and said, "Eat it. There's more here. I'll pick some more. Eat as much as you like." Little Purple Soul nodded happily. Then, she hugged the sun fruit and took small bites. Yun Nuashing looked at the sun trees nearby. She pondered for a moment, but did not pick any. Instead, she used her soul perception to find a few sun trees that looked very healthy. Then, she plucked all the fruits on them. There were about 15 of them. There are so many sun trees in this place. I wonder how long they have been here. Yun Nuashing's eyes sparkled as he looked at the sun fruits he plucked. Some of the sun fruits here were at least 10,000 years old. Even if this place was developed fairly, very few people could set foot here. Even if they did, it would take a lot of energy to pluck one sun fruit. She guessed that no one could harvest many. Someone like her who still had a lot of energy after plucking 15 sun fruits was an anomaly. Yun Nuashing clenched his fists. He still had a lot of energy left. Plucking 15 sun fruits had only used 1/10 of his energy. However, his energy capacity was many times more than the others. It was actually quite scary. It would be good if a normal person could pluck 2 or 3 sun fruits. The two areas seemed to be connected. Looking past the rows of sun trees, Yi Shiwen saw a pale, white forest in the distance. That should be the sun tree's counterpart, the sun tree. The sun fruit had the same effect as the sun fruit. The only difference was that one carried yang energy, while the other carried yin energy. They were suitable for different people. Yun Nuashing took a few steps and arrived at the sun tree. He could clearly feel that the energy in the surroundings had changed. Looking around, there was no one here. He could vaguely hear a feminine voice coming from the small platform on the other side. There were also sounds of energy colliding. However, it seemed that no one could break in. After carefully looking around for a while, Yun Nuashing used his hand to poke at a nearby sun tree. After confirming that there was no problem, he let out a sigh of relief. Looking around, he released his soul power and picked a few stronger sun trees. After plucking all the fruits, he clapped his hands and picked a big one for Little Purple Soul. Little Purple Soul, who had just finished eating the flaming sun fruit, saw this pale white fruit and its eyes lit up. It let out a happy laugh and opened its mouth to take a bite of the flaming sun fruit. If other people saw this, they would probably be heartbroken. The sun fruit and sun fruit were both precious treasures that could be used to refine medicine. The pills refined from them would be at least of the highest quality. Yet, they were crunching and chewing. However, Yun Nuashing didn't care at all. Well, if there are two areas, then, theoretically, that things should exist. After keeping the mysterious een fruit, Yin Nuoxing clapped his hands and could not help but chuckle softly. He muttered to himself, before turning his gaze towards the intersection between the two areas. With a flash, he appeared at the intersection. The thing that he was talking about was the strange tree where yin and yang intersected. Because it was too special and was cultivated by two completely opposite energies, it was too unbelievable. Many people doubted its existence, and there was a lot of debate. Therefore, even if this theory was very magical, it wasn't listed on the treasure of heaven and earth ranking. After all, no one had seen it before and couldn't fully understand its existence. Walking on the border with some anticipation, with a pale world on his left and a fiery red ocean on his right, Yin Nuoxing also seemed to be divided into two halves. The color of this place was perfectly divided into two colors. When he walked on the border, he was also dyed in two colors. It was very strange. However, this kind of thing was actually quite dangerous because the two opposing energies had indeed landed on his body. There was no guarantee that they wouldn't react inexplicably upon contact. Only a skilled person like Yin Nuoxing dared to do this. Found it. After walking with his eyes closed for a while, Yin Nuoxing suddenly opened his eyes and smiled. This wasn't the first time he saw this thing, but seeing it again made him feel a little emotional. What appeared in front of him was an open space. The sun fruit and the profound een tree were some distance away from this open space. In the center of this open space, there was a tree about 3 feet tall. Compared to the trees on both sides, this tree seemed a little small. However, there was nothing around it, but it stood out very conspicuously. The whole tree was dyed in two colors. The pale white and the fiery red flowed on the tree like a flowing liquid. They weren't separated from the middle, but the two colors were perfectly blended together. Stopping 10 meters away from the tree, Yin Nuoxing lowered his head and shifted his gaze away from the tree. The reason why he suddenly stopped was not because he was worried about anything, but because there was a beautiful figure under the tree. Someone had arrived before him. It was a tall figure. Her silk-like hair fluttered in the wind, hanging down to her waist. There was a charm to her body that blended into the world, as if she had become one with nature. The bluish-white robe wasn't luxurious and was a little plain, but it didn't reduce her charm. Even though he could only see her back, Yin Nuoxing could feel that this person should be a rare beauty. However, he didn't feel anything. Compared to her appearance, he was more interested in her aura, a divine underworld powerhouse. Yin Nuoxing was a little surprised when he saw through the strength of the beautiful figure in front of him. He didn't know if this person was the divine underworld powerhouse he sensed in the water cloud pavilion. To be able to come here, she clearly had some strength. He didn't believe that the two law marks couldn't even deal with a divine underworld powerhouse. This person shouldn't be a powerhouse of the younger generation. The first emperor of war of Kuan Yuan was a fourth transformation divine emperor. Counting the time of the seal, she shouldn't be. Yin Nuoxing muttered in his heart, but before he could finish, he was stunned. He remembered that he had seen a divine underworld powerhouse who wasn't even 200 years old. It seemed like he couldn't jump to conclusions so easily. While he was sizing up the beautiful figure, the person who stopped under the strange tree and seemed to be in a daze also sensed the movement behind her. She gently turned around, revealing the right side of her beautiful face. Exquisite, beautiful, and elegant. This was Yin Nuoxing's first impression. The side of her white face was suffused with some luster. It was faintly red under the light of the yang energy. Those watery eyes looked straight at him, but then she was stunned. Her slender eyebrows and tall nose wrinkled, and a beautiful voice that contained some astonishment softly sounded. Demigod rank. Just like how Yin Nuoxing was astonished by her aura, she was also astonished that he, who appeared here, was actually only a demigod rank. Chapter 949. In a world of ice and fire, there was a strange tree that was white and crimson in color. As the wind blew, the leaves on the tree made a strange tinkling sound. It sounded like the crisp sound of metal clanking against metal. The girl under the tree and the boy who looked like a girl stared at each other for a long time. The little girl in the boy's arms also looked up quietly. The wind ruffled their robes and hair. The three of them stared at each other for a long time without saying a word. It was a peaceful and beautiful scene. Yo! The moment Yin Nuashing raised his hand to greet her, the scene collapsed. The girl's face stiffened. She looked at him strangely. Her strange gaze moved back and forth on his face, but her attention was obviously not on him. She was only curiously sizing up this strange intruder. After a while, she looked away and looked at the strange tree again, as if she was waiting for something. Yin Nuashing felt a little awkward after being ignored. He scratched the back of his head and moved to the side. He walked around in a big circle and stopped on the other side of the strange tree. He also looked up at the strange tree. As for the girl, she kept looking at the strange tree and ignored him. Perhaps to her, a demigod was not worthy of her attention. Similarly, Yin Nuashing was too lazy to go closer. Otherwise, he would not have walked around to look at the side of the strange tree. This strange tree contained both yang and yin energy. In other words, it was an amalgamation of the two types of energy. However, it did not simply store the two types of energy. It also integrated the two types of energy into its body. That was why its branches and leaves were so colorful. However, this tree did not bear any fruits. Ah, this beautiful tree doesn't bear any fruits. Little Purple Soul sat on Yin Nuashing's shoulder and looked at the tree with only leaves. She could not help but grumble. She thought there would be fruits. Yin Nuashing smiled faintly. He raised his head and scratched the little girl's nose. He said, "When I first saw it, I thought the same as you. I thought it would not bear any fruits." Well, in fact, there isn't any. Yin Nuashing let out a light breath and turned his gaze to the strange tree. This tree won't produce any fruits. The two completely repulsive energies have fused into the tree. It's already a miracle that it can maintain itself and stabilize the two energies. Well, it's just that it won't produce any fruits. He didn't think that the godly dark elite would hear what he was whispering to the little Purple Soul. The latter couldn't help but laugh. It was a very light laugh without any warmth. It was just like a sneer. Yin Nuashing saw her sneer and blushed. He was a little embarrassed. He knew that the divine underworld expert did not believe him. After all, he was only a demigod. If the words were said by an emperor god expert, she would probably believe him. However, it did not matter whether she believed him or not. He could not be bothered to care. He scratched his cheek and did not say anything. Well, it seems like she doesn't know either. Yin Nuashing grumbled in his heart. The divine underworld expert stared at the leaves above her. He did not know if she was waiting or what. The fruits did not appear by waiting. However, he was too lazy to remind her or say anything. Although he did not mind the sneer, it was fine if she did not believe him. Let's wait until she leaves to avoid any trouble. Yin Nuashing sighed in his heart and shook his head. He should be more careful when he was weak. They waited quietly for a long time. Little Purple Soul struggled a few times and wanted to jump down from his shoulder. However, there was a divine underworld expert here. Yin Nuashing was cautious and did not let her go like he usually did. He held her in his arms and saw her puffing up her cheeks and punching his chest with her little fists. He could not help but laugh. He stretched out a finger to tease the little girl. Another half an hour passed in the blink of an eye. In this half an hour, no one else stepped onto this platform. The sounds of fighting on the two small platforms also quieted down. It seemed like no one else could set foot on this place. He did not know how the ancient fairy siblings were doing. Based on their recovered state, they might be able to take 4 or 5 fruits. Why aren't you leaving yet? Yin Nuashing couldn't stand it any longer. In this short period of time, less than an hour had passed, and the divine underworld expert was still standing there. His patience had also been worn down a little, and he couldn't help but mutter in his heart, "Hurry up and leave. Hurry up and leave. Why aren't you leaving yet?" He did not know if it was the effect of his grumbling, but the divine underworld expert suddenly sighed. He lowered his head and muttered, "It seems like there's no hope this year." Yin Nuashing could not help but laugh when he heard this. So this divine underworld expert came every year just to wait for that strange tree to bear fruit? He had already said that this tree would not bear fruit. After the divine underworld expert sighed, he glanced at Yin Nuoxing, who was still pretending to be stubborn. He frowned, but did not say anything. He turned around and walked towards the dark side. It seemed like he had given up. Seeing that he was finally willing to leave, Yin Nuoxing also heaved a sigh of relief. He glanced at the divine underworld expert and stared at the divine underworld expert until she disappeared into the forest. He waited for a few more minutes and even used his soul energy to scan the surroundings suspiciously. In these two forests, he only sensed the ancient fairy siblings. The divine underworld expert could no longer sense them. He then exhaled heavily and placed little purple soul on his shoulder. He smiled and said, "Wait a moment. Big brother will make you something good to eat." Little purple soul had almost fallen asleep from waiting. When she heard that there was something good to eat, her eyes shone brightly. She quickly nodded her little head and asked, "What's good to eat? What's good to eat?" Yin Nuoxing chuckled. He took out the arcane een fruit and blazing sun fruit from his pendant and carefully looked around. When he made sure that there was no one else around, he lightly stepped on the ground and floated in front of a tree branch. He looked around and found a branch. He tied the arcane een fruit and blazing sun fruit to the branch. He then plucked a red and pale leaf and placed it on top of the two fruits. After that, he lightly floated back a distance. Little purple soul's eyes widened in curiosity. The two fruits hung on the branch and were covered by a palm-sized leaf. The little girl scratched her head in confusion. She lowered her head and saw her brother's happy face. She could only grumble and pull his long hair back and forth. A moment later, the two fruits that were tied to the same branch slowly brightened. The leaf also emitted a bright light. Little purple soul quickly stared at it. When the leaf and the two fruits gradually brightened to a certain degree, they suddenly trembled and turned into a puddle of liquid. The three fruits then quickly merged together. The little girl could not help but cry out in surprise. "This tree won't bear any fruit. It only has one use." Yin Nuoxing pointed at the rapidly merging light and said, "That is, fuse the two fruits together and turn them into a fruit that contains two types of energy." Well, this fusion is not just a simple fusion. The new fruit will have a medicinal effect that is 10 times stronger than the original two fruits combined. It will also have some additional uses. For example, the blazing sun fruit alone can be used to concoct a low-level ultimate-grade medicinal pill with a few thousand herbs. However, it is not the main ingredient. However, when the blazing sun fruit and the arcane een fruit fuse into a fruit, the fruit can be used as the main ingredient in high-level ultimate-grade medicinal pill. Although I don't really understand. Little purple soul scratched her long hair in distress. Then she smiled happily and said, "But my brother is so awesome." "Of course." Yin Nuoxing grinned proudly and raised his head with all his might. He stretched his neck and said, "I'm your brother." In his opinion, the existence of this strange tree in this place was also very powerful. Although the Yin-Yang world was a large Yin-Yang world, it was not surprising that it would form such a place to nurture heavenly materials and earthly treasures. However, it was really incredible that there was such a forest and such a strange tree in such a small and calm area. According to his thinking, since such a strange tree could be nurtured, then logically speaking, the fire of the sun and the fire of the sun should also appear in the Shao Yin and Shao Yang. However, they did not. These two divine flames were not in this Yin-Yang world, but this strange tree appeared, which made Yin Nuoxing have to say that it was a little interesting. When the ball of light dissipated, a pale and crimson fruit was hanging on the branch. Its colors seemed to be flowing. Compared to the previous two fruits, it was smaller, only the size of a fist. However, the energy contained in it had been raised by several levels, or even dozens of levels. Wow! Hearing little purple soul's cheers, Yin Nuoxing smiled. He moved closer and plucked the fruit. During the process, he could feel that his energy had decreased by 1/10. He was shocked. He didn't expect to need so much energy to pluck the fruit again. "Well, I still have energy talismans. Let's make a few more." Yin Nuoxing touched his forehead and nodded. He placed the fruit in little purple soul's hand. Hearing the little girl's laughter, he grinned again. He quickly took out the other fruits and tied them to the nearby branches. He also plucked a few leaves and placed them on the other two fruits. Light appeared again and again. The brightest light was as bright as the sun. Yin Nuoxing squinted his eyes. He picked the biggest sun flame fruit and darking fruit and hung them on the branch. It seemed that the new fruit had something to do with the ripeness of the original two fruits. When the light dissipated, Yin Nuoxing quickly moved closer and plucked the fruits one by one. The energy in his body was depleting rapidly. When it reached its limit, he quickly blew up the energy talismans engraved in his soul to replenish the energy that was almost depleted. Those energy talismans were made when he was in the second seal of the magic rank. They were just enough to replenish his energy. However, he was now a demigod. His energy carrier had undergone a drastic change due to the changes in the elements. One energy talisman was no longer of much use. 20 energy talismans, and I've only replenished 1/3 of my energy. Looks like I have to remake them. Yin Nuoxing muttered and sighed helplessly. The talismans that he made in the past were useless now. When he finished plucking all the fruits, he was still holding a small one in his hand, intending to taste it himself. However, he suddenly shuddered. When he turned around, he saw that there was an extra person under the tree. That person's eyes were filled with unconcealable emotions as they stared at him. There was astonishment, confusion, and a bit of joy. Yin Nuoxing was slightly stunned. This person was the divine underworld elite who had just left. He didn't know when she came back. He was so focused on plucking the fruits that he forgot to take precautions. He didn't notice that she had come back. Now, it seemed like she had seen everything. Little Purple Soul also cried out in surprise. Holding the half-eaten fruit in his hand, he was as stunned as Yin Nuoxing. He didn't know what to do. Moreover, Yin Nuoxing was even more shocked. He sensed that the divine underworld elite's aura had changed. In his senses, the woman was no longer a divine underworld elite. Instead, she had jumped straight to the level of the emperor of the underworld. There seemed to be some fluctuations in her aura, rising and falling like the tide. When it was at its lowest, it was only at the level of a heavenly god. However, when it reached its peak, it was beyond what he could see. In other words, she had reached the level of an emperor of the gods. Oh, F***CK. I've never seen such a strange situation in my life. Yin Nuoxing also widened his eyes in shock. He had never seen anyone's aura fluctuate to such an extent. Due to certain physical factors, he had seen people's aura fluctuate within a realm. However, the extent of fluctuation of this woman's aura had crossed 4 realms. What kind of situation was this? How could her body withstand such turbulent energy? It was probably made of 12th level godly materials, right? Even his godly body couldn't withstand this strange energy fluctuation. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing quickly calmed down. He was a little stunned when he saw her looking at him with such a fluctuating state of mind. However, when he saw that she was indifferent and only stared at him with Mame Mao, the 2-colored fruit in his hand, he was also a little confused. After thinking for a while, he quickly turned to the side and took out the 2 fruits in front of her. Then, he repeated what he had just done. He plucked the fruit again and looked at her. The strange woman's expression froze. She looked at the forest on both sides thoughtfully. Finally, she looked at Yin Nuoxing questioningly and tilted her head. 2 fruits and 1 leaf. You can get what you want by hanging them on the same branch. Yin Nuoxing said with a kind smile as he waved the 2-colored fruit in his hand. After saying that, he landed on the ground. While the woman was still in a daze, he quietly retreated. Just as he was about to retreat into the forest on the sunny side, the woman finally came back to her senses. Her tall and slender body suddenly straightened. She turned to Yin Nuoxing and bowed deeply. Thank you. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. When he saw the faint smile on the woman's beautiful face, he also smiled back. He waved his hand and turned to walk into the forest. Sensing that the strange woman seemed to be busy, Yin Nuoxing wasn't in a hurry to leave. He took out a 2-colored fruit and took a leisurely bite. Then, he plucked some leaves from the flaming sun tree. Although these leaves couldn't fuse the two fruits like the strange tree, they had a miraculous effect when used to make tea. Just like the soul crystals from the soul crystal tree, the leaves from trees that contain spirituality and powerful energy mostly had the same effect. However, it was a bit of a waste to use the leaves of the glorious tree to make tea. Yin Nuashing recovered a bit after collecting a lot of things along the way. He plucked a few more flaming sun fruits. After thinking about it, he felt that his OCD was acting up. He ran to the profound een tree and plucked the same number of profound een fruits before running back. When he finished his work and arrived at the entrance of the flaming sun forest, Fairy Gu and Gu Chun had already been waiting there for a while. Brother Yun. Seeing Yin Nuashing come out, Gu Chun excitedly jumped up from the ground and cupped his hands. Fairy Gu also cupped her hands with a smile. You didn't go to the profound een tree. Yin Nuashing was surprised to see that Fairy Gu was also here. Profound een tree? Is it the opposite side? Fairy Gu was surprised. Yin Nuashing nodded and pointed inside. The two places are connected. I thought you. Oh, since you also came up from here, it shouldn't be a problem for you to find the flaming sun fruits. Hearing this, the siblings both laughed bitterly. Gu Xianling stroked the black hair in front of her forehead and said, I originally thought that I wouldn't be able to go over, but you're right. Because of my cultivation, I do need this flaming sun fruit. This is the first time I've seen how hard it is to pluck fruits. Guchen also smiled bitterly. The two of us only plucked 5, and we're already exhausted. It'll probably take a long time to recover before we can pluck them again. But there's not much time left. Brother Yin, how's your harvest? I've plucked a dozen. Yin Nuashing said casually. This number didn't include the profound een fruit, the ones that were used, and the ones that were eaten by little Z. So, he should have plucked about 30 of each. Fairy Gu and Gu Chun were speechless. This guy was indeed abnormal and different from ordinary people. They could tell that this guy was a little powerful from the fact that he could kill the Guardian in seconds. But they didn't expect him to be this powerful. We're going out. Brother Yin, what's your plan? Gu Chun asked. Yin Nuashing's eyes suddenly turned blue. He looked into the distance, but he couldn't see where Xian and the others were cultivating. After a while, he withdrew his gaze and said, I have nothing to do. My friends are cultivating in the yin-yang world and looking for something to do. I'll send you out. Okay. I don't know if the people of the Lingyun battle court have left. It's more or less dangerous for us in our current state. We'll have to trouble Brother Yin. Gu Chun cupped his hands. Fairy Gu nodded and thanked him. Yin Nuashing waved his hand. Anyway, I have nothing to do. He waved his hand and wrapped the two in a bubble. Yin Nuashing tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and flew into the air. He turned into a stream of light and flew out of the yin-yang world. He used a little light element and was not afraid of being discovered by the two. There are other places in the yin-yang world. Are you sure you don't want to take a look? Yin Nuashing tilted his head and said. Hearing this, Gu Chun shook his head with a smile and said, Thank you for your kindness, Brother Yin. But we didn't come out for a long time. We just came to the yin-yang world to take a look. Besides, there's also the matter of the Lingyun battle court. We have to go back and report it. In the past, they wouldn't attack us, people with low realms. We have to go back and tell them to be on guard. Yin Nuashing nodded and didn't ask them to stay. He asked again, Did you see any fun places? The brother and sister smiled bitterly and shook their heads. Yin Nuashing could only spread his hands helplessly. It seemed that he had to find a way to pass the time himself. He rushed all the way to the nearest exit with the two. 10 minutes later, he came out of the yin-yang world. He looked around and rushed in the direction of the Water Cloud City. There is a portal in the Water Cloud City. Is it okay to leave you there? There will be no problem once we enter the city. There are many guards in the Water Cloud City. They won't dare to mess around in the city. Gu Chun responded loudly. Yin Nuashing nodded and sped up again. If Gu Xianling and Gu Xianling were paying attention, they would be able to see bits of brilliant golden light flashing across the space. However, they seemed to be whispering about something and did not notice this. Not long after, they returned to Water Cloud City. They even deliberately stopped at the teleportation gate area and released the siblings from the water bubble. Brother Yun, thank you so much for this time. If you have time in the future, please come to the Azure Emperor's City to play. Gu Chun and the fairy cupped their fists at Yin Nuoxing and laughed softly. Eh. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. You are from the Azure Emperor's City? Gu Chun grinned. Azure Emperor's City. You will know who we are when you come. Yin Nuoxing scratched his head and said with a strange expression, Oh, I really have to go to the Azure Emperor's City after some time. When they are done with their cultivation, I will leave for the Azure Emperor's City. I am very interested in the Immortal King Valley. Brother Yin is coming too? The fairy covered her mouth and laughed. When you come, we will entertain you. There are many people who are coveting the Immortal King Valley. Then we will meet again after some time. We will return to the Azure Emperor's City directly. The two of them did not hesitate after Gu Chen's words sounded. They waved their hands and turned around in a free and easy manner, after which they rushed toward an enormous teleportation door. After waving the things in their hands at the guards, they entered the silver-blue light curtain and disappeared. Yin Nuoxing lowered his head. Below the platform of the teleportation gate, there was a 3-meter-tall signboard with the words Thousand Flows City written on it. Looking at the 3 words, Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. He calmly opened the treasure map and found some new markings. He had already marked the cities that should be in this era on the treasure map. After that, he found the Thousand Flows City at the top right corner of the Kuan Origin region. It was about a few 100 million miles away from the Azure Emperor's City. Glancing at the teleportation gate, he discovered that the Azure Emperor's City was right beside the Thousand Flows City. Those two seemed to have entered the wrong gate. Those two fellows should be fine, right? Calmly keeping the treasure map, Yin Nuoxing stared at the sky and sighed. In the faraway Thousand Flows City, Gu Chun and the fairy came out of the teleportation gate. Seeing the unfamiliar scene, they couldn't help but be stunned. The two of them stared at each other for a while. Gu Chun, sister, did we enter the wrong gate? The fairy nodded in a daze. There is no gate to return home in the Thousand Flows City. Then should we run back and take another turn? The fairy glanced at him. That would make him laugh to death. Who told you to act cool and handsome? You still want to turn back after acting cool? Gu Chun raised his head and looked at the sky, his mood complicated. Why don't we have a cup of tea before we leave? The fairy sighed and nodded. Chapter 950. In Shuiyun City, Yin Nuoxing and Little Purple Soul wandered aimlessly on the streets. They looked at the crowd on the street, and the crowd looked at them with interest. They could not help but praise them in their hearts. What a beautiful little girl. Yin Nuoxing could feel their thoughts through her eyes. Yin Nuoxing could not help but sigh. However, since no one came forward to disturb them, he could not be bothered to make a fuss about it. The streets were as lively as ever. The hawking words of the stalls were more or less the same. He had heard similar words more than once in other places. The shops on the street were similar as well. Occasionally, he would find something that was similar to the city's specialty, but it was rare to see it. When they passed by some small schools or rich families, they could hear childish shouts through the walls. There were faint collisions of energy, and there were also slightly more mature voices. However, they were all young teenagers. They were the younger generation of the current generation. The gap between the generations was quite large. Yin Nuoxing estimated that when Xian and the others had all become ultimate gods or divine kings, the newborn children would be the next generation. There was still a long way to go before that day. Shuiyun City was a large city. Yin Nuoxing and Little Purple Soul wandered around for a long time, but they had only explored a small area. They ate, drank, and played on the streets with the little girl. It was quite relaxing. However, there were fewer rowdy voices around them. Originally, this was the responsibility of Yuan Shi, Nightmare, and Chu Yingjian. The sudden absence of a large group of noisy people made Yin Nuoxing feel quite uncomfortable. Perhaps they were used to it. Brother, is it okay for us to come out and play like this? Sister Xian and the others are still cultivating. Little Purple Soul held the candied hawthorn in her right hand and held Yin Nuoxing's hand with her left. She blinked her big gem-like eyes and said, Yes, no problem. Yin Nuashing smiled and nodded. A strand of the divine pattern tree has extended to their bodies. I can sense their condition here at all times. Everything is fine. They have already completed the transformation of their bodies, which is much faster than I expected. Right now, they're using the divine pattern tree and the mysterious world to refine the divine level Xian techniques that they learned a while ago. This might take some time, as divine level Xian techniques are not that easy to cultivate. Moreover, Xian, Ming, Bing Air, Yuan Shi, and Nightmare have all chosen divine level Xian techniques based on their senses. Those 5 will be a little difficult, but they are not in a hurry to cultivate. Will they be very powerful if they learn it? Little Purple's soul asked curiously. Of course, Xian techniques and Xian techniques directly determine a person's strength in the same realm. Xian and the others are cultivating the best Xian techniques in this world, which originated from the ancient age when the laws were perfected. Compared to people of the same generation in this era, they are much more advanced. Yin Nuashing squatted down and rubbed her cheeks with a smile. Little Purple's soul mumbled for a while, then rolled her eyes and pinched her brother's nose with her free hand. She giggled, although the little girl didn't quite understand what her brother meant. In her heart, her brother was always the most powerful. She didn't care about anything else, and she didn't care about what Yin Nuashing said. She just knew that he was very powerful. The brother and sister wandered around the city for a while. Yin Nuashing took the time to open the treasure map and looked at it. There were 2 pillars of creation in the wilderness, which was quite a distance away from Watercloud City. However, with his speed, it wouldn't be a problem for him to go back and forth in 2 days. He planned to solve them first. There was no point in waiting. However, he wasn't in a serious state of cultivation right now, so his cultivation speed was only comparable to an ordinary person's. If he used a large amount of energy, his cultivation speed might be even slower. However, it wouldn't be a problem for him to slow down his cultivation speed. Thinking of this, he nodded. He bent down and hugged Little Purple's soul into his arms, placing her on his shoulder. Then, with a flash of his body, a magical formation appeared, and he disappeared from the street in an instant, giving the innocent bystanders fright. Little Purple Soul appeared in midair in a flash. She raised her hand excitedly and hugged Yin Nuashing's head tightly with her other hand. She asked excitedly, "Brother, where are we going?" "We're going to solve some difficult diseases that have been accumulating over the years." Yin Nuashing patted her dangling feet and said, "Hold on tight." Then 6 wings shot out from his back and expanded to 10 feet in size. His whole body was filled with a brilliant golden light, dyeing him like a small sun. He could even vaguely hear Little Purple Soul's excited and tender cries. In an instant, the 2 of them turned into extremely brilliant rays of light, shooting across the sky at an unobservable speed. With Yin Nuashing's current strength, his speed could already exceed the speed of light and could even reach several times that. If he was used against an enemy, he might die before the enemy could even react. However, it was very rare for a wielder of the light element to unleash such extreme speed when facing an enemy. There was no other reason other than that the wielder of the light element might not be able to see the enemy's movements clearly at that speed. Even if the wielder of the light element used it for a sneak attack or assassination, they would only use the speed of light with the thought of putting all their eggs in one basket. At such a speed, no matter how strong one's battle instincts were, it would be impossible to dodge. It was only because the light element was too powerful that it was arbitrated by the laws of heaven and earth. Otherwise, why would there be so few wielder of the light element in this world? In the yin-yang sky, Yin Nuashing could sense that everyone was in good condition with the help of the divine pattern tree. He could also sense that there were some abnormalities here, but there were no negative effects, so he ignored them and did not look carefully at what was happening here. At this time, at the top of the yin-yang sky, 8 barriers covered the sky and the sun, completely isolating this place from the outside world as if it had formed a world of its own. However, the energy from the outside world was gathering inside like a huge whirlpool. Inside the energy barriers, the energy was so dense that it condensed into water droplets. There were even some crystals in the denser places. When they fell to the ground, they jingled like pearls falling on a jade plate. The divine pattern tree took root in the ground and stood still, releasing a violent suction force like a black hole, constantly sucking in the energy from the outside world. In front of the divine pattern tree, there were many auras, some with fairy auras, some with wild auras, and some with monstrous demonic auras. There were even vast phenomena, such as moonlight soaring into the sky and holy angels descending. These phenomena were only embryonic forms, but they had already produced extremely terrifying energy fluctuations, rapidly consuming the energy of this world. Cultivating this kind of mysterious technique seemed to consume a lot of energy. Even the energy condensed in this world could only be maintained to the minimum level to prevent the 9 people from interrupting their cultivation. It was hard to imagine what kind of cultivation environment would allow them to cultivate once they reached the great success stage. Dozens of imprints appeared on Yuan Shi's body, like the starry sky and the sun. There were also many figures. It was as if all the gods and demons had descended together and turned into one body, encircling him. He was like a god overlooking the world. His extremely fierce aura was like a wild hurricane that had been condensed for countless eras. At this moment, it was released, causing the space to constantly tremble. Even though the space here was stable, it showed signs of collapsing. At this moment, the divine body of the Yuan family really had a great majesty. It looked disdainfully and looked down on the world. It was as if it had broken away from the category of the human race and become a god, or an ancient god. Xian's long hair fluttered in the wind, and her fairy chi filled the air, making her look as ethereal as a banished immortal. Her pretty face glowed with red light, and she was breathtakingly beautiful. Her temperament was close to that of a fairy, and those who looked at her could not help but want to kneel before her. The majestic fairy chi came from her soul, and she was constantly changing herself, making her body evolve toward perfection. The fairy chi made the surrounding ground glow with vitality, and the air was filled with an aura that made people feel full of vitality. She had directly influenced and changed the terrain of this place, and for a long time, she could even make things like fairies grow in this place. The incomplete 5 elements body, even without the origin, had reached the level of small success. The people sitting beside her even faintly felt that the 5 elements were somewhat unstable and out of control. She was only at the small success level, and she was already so powerful. When the origin was restored, perhaps she could really move the 5 elements in the world with a single thought. Ming's silver-white hair danced wildly, and the brilliant golden light shone through her eyelids into the space. It was like beams of divine light that were tens of thousands of feet long. It was very hot. Her holy and beautiful face was filled with determination. She was originally a human, but she had been promoted to an angel, the representative of the most holy of gods. Her holiness was even purer than yin nuashing. She was the light, and at this moment, she was as brilliant as the sun. A huge golden halo appeared behind her, and in the void, there seemed to be hymns playing continuously. It had penetrated the obstruction of time and descended here. It was incomparably holy and peaceful. Her elements had been replaced with more powerful holy flames, and she was filled with the will to fight. This was a change she had made after the incident in the 5 elements realm. After many transformations, she seemed to be very complete, and the soaring will to fight made the heavens and the earth pale in comparison. Beside Nightmare, endless devil chi surged violently, surging into the sky like an upside-down waterfall. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled beside him, as if there were ghosts and gods howling, demons roaring, and gods weeping blood. The scene was very shocking, as if all the darkness in the world was gathering here for his use. He wanted to devour the entire world, and even the light here became quite dim. The devil chi on his body became even more turbulent. He was the only one whose devil chi did not transform into divine essence. Instead, it was replaced by an even more powerful demonic aura. This devil chi was not inferior to the orthodox devil chi of the Devil Clan. At this moment, it was extremely sharp and contained a different flavor in the devil chi, as if he was a demon god. They were all outstanding people. Whether it was Xian, Yuan Shi, or the others, they were all supreme existences among the younger generation. They had the potential and the strength. However, Yin Nuoxing had always been in front of them. Even if he did not release his light, most of their light was obscured, and they did not have the opportunity to shine. Moreover, they also knew that the path they had chosen should not be limited to this. The so-called genius of the younger generation, the supreme of the younger generation, were too insignificant. They had decided to follow him many years ago. Now that they knew his mysteriousness, his past, the challenges he faced, and everything he carried, if they wanted to follow behind that idiot, they had to look at more than their current achievements. To him, this was not the starting point. This was just revisiting his starting point, which was high up in the clouds. If they wanted to follow him, they could only grit their teeth and work hard. Once they had made a decision, they would not hesitate no matter how difficult or dangerous it was. Compared to a goal, Yin Nuoxing was more like a ray of light in everyone's hearts. It was reflected in their souls and hearts, constantly spurring them on. In a short 3 to 4 days of cultivation, Little Moon and Yuer, who had just advanced to the demigod level, showed signs of wavering again. It seemed that they would be able to advance to the beginner god level soon. After Yin Nuoxing's transformation, their talents would not be weak. Moreover, the influence of the god's runes on them had not ended. They would be able to rush to the beginner god level in a short period of time. The initial god realm was a hurdle, an extremely difficult hurdle. It was one of the most difficult hurdles in a person's life. It would block the path of countless geniuses. What heaven's proud sons of heaven, the child of heaven, the child of the world. There were many who were blocked at this hurdle. Once they were blocked, there would be no heaven's proud sons of heaven to speak of. The second hurdle was the beginner god level. However, this first hurdle had Yin Nuoxing, so to everyone, it was not as difficult as it was for others. Even the second hurdle might be much easier, as long as that day came. These were two extremely large watersheds. Geniuses who had been blessed by the heavens might not be able to cross over if they exploded too quickly. Those who rose to the top later could also cross over. There were many people who were late bloomers. Their journey to the beginner god level might be smooth all the way. This step was like a carp leaping over the dragon's gate. It was the biggest nirvana rebirth in a cultivator's life. This was also the reason why godly experts were high up and could look down on others. Of course, Yin Nuoxing was not in this category. Other than that, even if one was at the peak of the demigod level, even if there was only 1,000th of a foot that had not crossed over, they were still inferior and were not on the same level. At the level of Xian and the others, the advancement of small realms was no longer important. The first reason was because of the seal. The second reason was that in the beginner god level, many methods to increase one's strength were open to them, such as the transformation of elements and willpower, the direction of the use of the spirit, and in addition to major in strength, there were many times when they could minor in other areas. These were all changes brought about by the first reason. Any beginner god expert who had some plans for the future would focus on the problem of combat power, how to achieve perfection in this realm, how to become the strongest so that they could become invincible among the younger generation. This was the most important thing. Everyone would be under the seal. The advancement of realms required time and effort. This was something that would not be considered unless there was a special method. Yin Nuoxing could continuously remove the seal on them, but she did not remove it all at once. Instead, she let them train themselves. This was also the reason that although their realms had increased, there was still room for improvement in their combat power. As a result, their realms were not perfect, and there would inevitably be gaps in their realms in the future. Not far away, Bing Air looked up to the sky and shouted. Her blue-golden hair swayed, and thousands of ice crystals appeared in the air. Then they gradually solidified. Even the violent energy whirlwind was frozen in the ice crystals. Then it gradually expanded, The cold aura caused the temperature of the area to drop again and again. The cold power that she had mastered was already able to freeze the space. Rumble. The sudden rumble of thunder shocked everyone. They quickly opened their eyes and saw Qin Yin rushing up to the sky. The surrounding array continued to expand until it covered the entire sky. Qin Yin rushed up to the sky to fight against the heavenly tribulation. Her cultivation seemed to have crossed a small threshold. Everyone was not surprised that a heavenly tribulation would appear for a mystic technique of this level. However, the heavenly tribulation made everyone a little shocked. Ordinary lightning tribulation superimposed on elemental tribulation, flame riot, earth splashing, void disturbance is that chaos element or darkness element. The appearance of darkness element or chaos element made everyone's expression change slightly. They couldn't help but focus their attention on it. They were prepared to suppress their cultivation and save someone. There was no other way. The shock and fear that this kind of power brought to them was deeply imprinted in their hearts. How could they not be surprised when they saw the heaven and earth law projecting darkness element or chaos element? Fortunately, Qin Yin had withstood the tribulation. She was tossed back and forth by several types of heavenly tribulations in the sky, and it was only after a while that she landed in a sorry state. Her body was covered in a strange aura, and she hurriedly entered a state of cultivation to heal her injuries. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that she was fine. The crystallized yang essence and yin essence gave the energy they cultivated a wonderful aura. When they operated it, it had a very wonderful effect in their bodies, which surprised them quite a bit. Moreover, after it was integrated into their souls, it made their souls more transparent and pure. When they breathed out, there was mysterious yang qi and mysterious yin qi, which was much more powerful than the blazing yang qi of the Emperor of War of Kuan Yuan that day. In these 3 or 4 days, a lot of things happened in the yin-yang world, such as the opening of some trial grounds. As people continued to pass through them, they were discovered. Those trial grounds, similar to the platform where Yun Nuoxing and the others were on, had many opportunities waiting for them to discover. Among them, the positions of Shao Yin and Shao Yin had always been coveted by people. There were the densest yin and yang energy there, but the danger was also one of the highest. Many people had special means to go deep into the energy tide, but before they could get close to the position of the 2 eyes, the energy barrier kept collapsing as if it was burning. The energy there was already unimaginably powerful. Except for those 2 places, many people went deep into the other places of the energy tide and took the risk to temper themselves. While Xian and the others were concentrating on their cultivation, they suddenly heard the roar of a divine weapon coming from outside, causing the 2 kinds of energy in heaven and earth to surge and become extremely violent. With a wail, a loud sound of metal breaking spread throughout the yin-yang world. A huge amount of energy exploded in the sky, which shocked them all. A divine weapon has exploded. Nightmare's expression was solemn. They were all awakened by the explosion of energy. Could it be that someone wants to go deep into the position of the eye with a divine weapon? Everyone pondered and was a little curious, but Yin Nuoxing was not here at this time. It would be very dangerous to leave the energy barrier, so they could only suppress their curiosity and continue to cultivate. Boom! Another day or 2 passed, and this time, an even more intense explosion resounded through the clouds. The energy was even stronger and even more vast, but no one was startled awake. They had all entered a rather miraculous state that could greatly increase the speed of their cultivation of divine-grade profound arts. Only Ho Ming, who was pondering over divine power, suddenly opened his eyes. Ming Ming woke up from his stupor. Turning his head, he saw dazzling energy fireworks exploding behind the many dazzling barriers. However, they were still some distance away from them. However, compared to the previous explosion, the commotion was much greater and closer. Through the barrier, the outside world could not see the situation inside, but the inside could see the situation outside. There seemed to be many people holding weapons and staggering in the energy tide, constantly approaching. This place was close to Xiaoyang, but it was still some distance away. However, the momentum of that group of people did not seem to be heading toward Xiaoyang. Chapter 9:51. Ming did not pay attention to the changes in the outside world for too long. Soon, she retracted her attention from the outside world and looked at the others who were cultivating well. After a while, she nodded. There was an indestructible mark between her and Yin Nuoxing. She could sense that he was not by her side at this time. He had gone to a place far away, speeding across the sky at the speed of light. Since he was not around, she volunteered to look after everyone. Cultivating was not completely immersed in it. Holy Spirit divine technique, Ming murmured. Yun Nuoxing knew what level of mystical technique they had chosen, but he did not know what they had chosen. Naturally, he did not know that Ming would choose the most difficult divine technique to cultivate, and it was a divine technique of this level. However, he had reminded them in advance, so naturally, he would not dissuade them. Cultivating with difficulty would naturally give them benefits equivalent to the difficulty. They said that they could overcome this difficulty, so Yin Nuoxing naturally believed them and allowed them to make their own choices. He only needed to support them from behind. What is the power of the heart? It doesn't seem like the power of will. What is the heart's soul statue? The power of the world? It is not the power of the origin of the world, nor is it the power of the origin. There is also the power of the primordial realm. At this time, Ming was very conflicted. She had learned some divine techniques that were not at her level in advance. Just by deciphering the information, she could not understand most of it. There was a lot of information contained in it. Some of it could only be accessed by high-level gods, and some of it could only be accessed by those who had reached the level of God. She could only choose to cultivate the parts that she knew, but even so, she had benefited a lot. Leaving aside the parts that could only be understood by gods, those were already taboos. Gods who had not reached the level of God were not allowed to pry into them. She also did not dare to cultivate those casually, as it might lead to death. That was the domain of gods. Ordinary people, even high-level gods, could only retreat. With a stomach full of questions, Ming gradually calmed her mind and entered a deep state of cultivation again. The place became quiet again. At this time, in Enyang sky, groups of people were sweeping across the land like a carpet search, leaving behind a mess wherever they passed. This was not a safe area, not an area sealed by energy, but a large area of energy tides. Many people in Enyang sky gathered in the area of energy tides at this time, digging 3 feet into the ground, climbing over mountains and ridges, and even uprooting whole forests in the forest, revealing bare land, as if they were looking for something, and they were looking for something in groups, making this area a mess. How is it? Did you find it? A group of divine princes gathered from all directions. They looked at each other and said, I haven't seen them. The latest news says that they are heading north. We are already so deep into the energy tide. If we stay any longer, the burden on the energy barrier will be too great. I'm afraid that it won't be able to hold on. One of them shook his head and said, Damn it, could it be that he ran over to the moon? Big brother, what is that thing? The gloomy divine master frowned and glared at him fiercely. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. We just need to search. The young supreme master of this generation is looking for that thing. If he finds it, he will be rewarded. It's a saint-grade mystic technique. Their eyes flickered slightly. A saint-grade mystic technique was something that only big forces could have. If they could get one, how many years would they have to work less? Boom! There was a violent energy explosion in the distance, causing everyone to turn around and see a vast amount of energy surging at the end of their line of sight. The ultimate God expert's expression changed. The energy from a mid-grade divine artifact is over there. Chase! The few of them bellowed. With the words Saint rank profound art, it was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Their flying speed increased by a large amount. In a flash, they disappeared from their original location and appeared in the sky a few thousand meters away. As they left, The small hill that was filled with desolation also became calm. There was still very wild and violent energy surging in the distance, but it did not affect this place. After this calm continued for a few minutes, the huge trees that were stacked together on the ground suddenly wriggled gently. Soon after, a round white ball was forcefully squeezed out from the pile of remains of the huge trees, and there seemed to be a poochie sound. That round white ball had 2 big cat ears. Its 4 little legs were so short that only the soles of its feet could be seen. At the front of its cat ears, there were 2 small eyes that were only the size of a little thumb. The scara of its eyes was very small, and its eyeballs were rolling around. It was very intelligent. Below its eyes was a small mouth. There was also a tail that was much longer than its body. It looked like a cat's tail, but at the tip of its tail, there was a flower that seemed to be connected together. This round little creature looked like a flat ball. Excluding its tail, it was a little shorter than a foot. Its fur was dirty because it had been hiding in the wreckage for a long time. At this moment, this round white ball was standing on the pile of remains of the huge trees. Seeing those people go far away, it shook its body in a human-like manner and let out a sigh of relief. However, when it thought of its sorry appearance when it was chased to the heavens and the earth, its 2 cat ears drooped down. The fur around its ears also drooped down. It was a little listless, and the tail behind it also drooped down powerlessly. Whoosh! Suddenly, a loud sound of wind breaking came from the horizon. It startled this little creature so much that its fur stood up. Its ears and tail were also raised to the sky. Its 2 little eyes looked nervously in the direction of the sound of wind breaking. Then, as if it was frightened, it let out a mournful cry. Its 4 little feet hurriedly stepped on the huge tree, and like a white cannonball, it quickly shot into the distance. Found it, that round white thing. Inform the first-generation spirit emperor. It's in this direction. Following the sound of wind breaking, a large group of people appeared. There were about 60 to 70 of them. Each and every one of them had a majestic aura, and they held astonishing weapons in their hands. When they saw that little white creature, it was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Their eyes shone, and they completely treated it as a moving saint-rank profound technique. They shouted the slogan of ghosts and monsters and rushed down. The weapons in their hands were wildly bombarding the ground below without any hesitation. Wherever that white light went, the heaven and earth would overturn. Some people did not hesitate to suffer the backlash of the energy of this heaven and earth, and still wanted to use their powerful divine tools in order to keep that white small beast. They almost flipped the earth over from the bombardment. In a distant place, there was an ocean-like lake, mountain range, and grassland. This place was as tranquil as a fairyland. A black metal pillar was erected above the sea, and it reached straight to the horizon. Countless brilliant and mysterious golden runes covered this black pillar. Following a light sound from the runes, the pillar suddenly brightened and dimmed in an instant. It also announced that they had achieved their goal this time. Phew, it's done, it's done. Now we are only missing the 2 from Overturned Sea City and Azure Emperor City. Yin Nuashing heaved a long sigh of relief. His figure swayed, and he directly rushed to the grassland. He sat down and conveniently lay down. Little Purple Soul nimbly jumped away from his shoulder. After he lay down, Little Purple Soul crawled to his side and poked his face with its little finger. Without the divine imprints of the divine body, Yin Nuashing only felt that he had used too much energy recently. Even if he recovered, he still felt a little tired. It was more accurate to say that he was tired because he had recovered too many times. The fatigue came from his soul and spirit. If he had the divine imprints, this degree of exhaustion would not make him feel tired. The soft grassland, the sky was not glaring, and the wind in the distance was slightly cool. It made him feel very comfortable. Tiredness rushed to his head in an instant. Looking at this scenery, it was better to sleep for a while. This pillar is so far away. Little Purple Soul poked Yin Nuashing's face for a while before turning around and sitting down. She lifted her head and opened her little mouth to look at the huge black pillar that was filled with golden runes. The two pillars of creation that were originally located in the wilderness had already been fixed up by Yin Nuashing. After thinking for a while, he felt that there was still some time left. Thus, he decided to search for the pillars of creation in his memory to see if he could find the pillar of creation that he had forgotten. In the end, he spent more than 2 days of effort, traversing through numerous cities and walking through more than 10 pillars of creation. Finally, he was lucky enough to stumble into this place and found the correct pillar of creation. If it was really as he expected, there were only 9 pillars that were connected to this grand protective formation. That meant that there were only 2 pillars left. They were located in the Covered Sea City and the Azure Emperor City. Little Purple Soul sat for a while before getting up restlessly. She stretched out her little finger to tease Yin Nuashing while giggling uncontrollably. "Stop fooling around." Yin Nuashing wrinkled his nose and closed his eyes to remove that naughty little finger. He then turned around and hugged Little Purple Soul into his arms. He rubbed his face against her soft little face and hugged her like a pillow. He said drowsily, "I'll just rest for a while. I'll be fine after resting for a while." Little Purple Soul smiled bitterly. She couldn't break free from her brother's embrace. Moreover, he had closed his eyes. It was useless to act cute and pitiful now. Her little stomach growled. However, when she saw that Yin Nuashing seemed to be very tired, Little Purple Soul didn't fool around anymore. After thinking for a while, she decided to close her eyes and sleep. The brother and sister lay together peacefully, snoring softly. There was no sound of wind around them. The place where the pillar of creation was located was absolutely safe. They didn't have to worry about anything. After a long time, the sun outside started to doze off and the sky started to turn yellow. They hugged each other and slept for half a day. This situation continued for a while. When the sky gradually darkened, Yin Nuashing, who was sleeping, suddenly opened his eyes. Under the star pearl between his eyebrows, a mark exploded with light. His eyes lit up and he sat up. Little Purple Soul suddenly felt her body lift up. She instinctively hugged Yin Nuashing's arm tightly and wiped the saliva at the corner of her mouth on his sleeve. She quickly opened her eyes and asked, "Brother? Brother? Brother? What's wrong?" Seeing the saliva stain on his sleeve, Yin Nuashing's face darkened. He hurriedly took out a towel to wipe it, then wiped the corner of Little Purple Soul's mouth clean. Only then did he say in a low voice, "My spirit barrier is under attack." Little Purple Soul exclaimed, then Sister Xian and the others. Yin Nuashing shook his head with a strange look. "It doesn't look like it was attacked. There was no follow-up attack feedback to me. Could it be a test? I think it was more like a stray bullet that brushed past the edge of the barrier. It was not a direct impact. Something seems to have happened in the Yin-Yang world, and it's going to affect that area. It's strange. It's difficult for even high-level gods to enter the place where the energy tide is. There aren't any high-level gods who win in this time, right?" Yin Nuashing scratched his head. Other than that strange woman he had seen on the platform at the top of the mountain, there was no one else. Could it be that there had been a change in the energy tide? However, as he thought of Gu Xianling and the other person, he suddenly understood. Some forces had explored the Yin-Yang world many times. Naturally, they had some unique ways to go deep into the energy tide at the lowest cost. The siblings were an example. This went deep and could not do anything with the energy there. Naturally, they could not use it to refine their bodies. So he was very curious that someone had broken into that place. Let's go back first. We've rested for a while. After hesitating for a moment, Yin Nuashing sighed. He stood up and stretched. Then he picked up Little Purple Soul, who was looking up at him and wanted to hug him, and put him on his shoulder. Then he tapped the ground with his feet and jumped backward. After a while, he touched the edge of the entrance and left the place. Quickly skimming into the sky, Yin Nuashing opened the treasure map and checked the direction. After a moment, he turned around. The light elements surged to the limit, and the power of space also surged. Then with a boom, a gap was blasted open in space. He rushed straight in, intending to use the speed of light to fly through the void quickly. The distance would be shortened a lot. Xian, girl, Bing air, answer me. Yin Nuashing found the soul seeds of these people in his mind. He tried to call them, but he did not hear any sound. He could only feel that they were still in good condition. He could not help but smack his lips. TSK. Have they entered a deep state of cultivation? No wonder. With that array, it's easy to enter a deep state of cultivation. Is there anyone still alive? If you're still alive, say something. He did not give up and shouted again. In the end, no one answered. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head. Behind him, six wings shot out, and his speed increased several times. Now, he could only hurry back. However, the distance was a little far. Even if he hurried in the void with the help of the space array and the superluminal speed, it would take a long time to return. He had gone too far this time. I hope they're all right. Yin Nua Planet once said, life doesn't go as you wish. Every day, there will be misfortunes. Yin Nua Planet once said, misfortunes happen every day. At this moment, no one knew whether someone's luck had reached its limit or if 1/10 of Yin Nua Planet's luck had slightly fluctuated. The movement caused was like a shiver in the immortal realm. As a result, the immortal realm started to rumble and tremble. At the same time, all the volcanoes erupted. It was estimated that most people's lives would come to an end, although they were not that unlucky. For Yin Nuashing, who hated trouble, this degree was about the same. In the yin-yang world, the divine pattern tree inside the barrier was crazily devouring the energy of heaven and earth. The devouring power was so strong that the space outside was slightly distorted. It needed a large amount of energy to maintain the energy concentration in the barrier. Originally, it could maintain this balance very quietly, and the outside world would not have much movement. Until a certain moment when the 7 gods and 2 demigods were cultivating mystic techniques above the divine grade, they entered a critical period at the same time. The demand for energy increased exponentially, and the energy concentration in this world began to decrease. The energy crystals piled up on the ground melted, and the energy mist in the space became thinner. The divine pattern tree sensed the decrease in energy concentration, so it began to devour the energy from the outside world fiercely, and it was almost in a state where the supply could not meet the demand. The movement of 9 mystic techniques above the divine grade, operating at the same time, was too terrifying. Even though Xian and the others had not even reached the beginner level, they were still constantly extracting the energy of heaven and earth to refine their bodies and cultivate mystic techniques. This process should have been carried out in the starry sky, and the endless power of the stars was not afraid of them exhausting it. However, the strange energy in the yin-yang world was a strange energy formed between heaven and earth after all. After many years of precipitation and accumulation, such a rich energy tide was formed. At this time, after being extracted by 9 mystic techniques above the divine grade, the energy concentration could almost be clearly felt gradually decreasing, just like how the water level could be seen with the naked eye when the tide was low. At this time, the people who were chasing the mysterious small beast in the energy tide also inadvertently discovered this situation, but they did not pay much attention to it, nor did they know what had happened. They were just concentrating on finding the small beast, until buzz! 9 extremely brilliant energy radiances burst out from the top of the 9 people's heads and rushed toward the sky. The energy barrier also began to expand because of this surge of energy enveloping the sky. When the 9 light pillars reached a certain place in the sky and stopped, the expansion of the barrier also stopped, turning into a very high arc-shaped energy shield. However, the 9 energy essences were too vast, causing the energy of heaven and earth to riot. The elemental power surged like a tide. The mountains shook and the space trembled. Even the energy barriers that Yin Nuashing was proud of, the imperial god diagram that was said to be able to withstand the siege of an emperor god, and the void enchantment that could cover everything, could not block such brilliance. Originally, the void enchantment froze all the energy in this area on the level of rules, and was used by Yin Nuashing to block all the prying from the outside world distorting part of the function of the void enchantment. However, at this time, this ninth-grade divine great array could not stop the divine light from boiling in this place. Even standing in the distance, one could vaguely see 9 brilliant energy light pillars connecting heaven and earth on the horizon. It was very blurry, but it was very clear that they stood there, causing the space to tremble and the sky to rumble. One could vaguely see 9 figures overlooking heaven and earth from there. That is, countless people turned their gazes and looked at this scene in astonishment. They could sense 9 majestic and terrifying energy auras brewing and transforming. Vaguely, they could see an incomparably sacred golden giant tree. It was a giant tree that was formed by divine patterns. It stood there with an indomitable spirit. The leaves that were covered with divine patterns swayed, and there was a sacred light flowing out, condensing into a long river. It was as if divine light had descended to the world. The sacred aura caused many people to stop in their tracks. The white small beast's eyes reflected the 9 rays of brilliance and the golden divine pattern tree. In a hurry, it turned its head and dashed in that direction. The people who were chasing after it were stunned by the appearance of the divine pattern tree. After a while, when they saw the white beast dashing in that direction, they shouted and quickly chased after it. Stop! Divine grade mystic technique. Divine tree. The group of people was speechless. Did something strange sneak in just now? At this moment, many people who were chasing after the white small beast turned their gazes towards the golden divine pattern tree with strange expressions. They whispered to the people beside them, and the group of people rushed towards the place where the divine pattern tree had bloomed. In the distance, a figure stood upright on the mountain peak. He did not rely on any barrier or any other power. He used his physical body to block the energy tide. When the light from the divine pattern tree burst out, he also turned his gaze. In his eyes, there was a flash of light. His devilish red and black hair danced in the wind. One of his eyes was black and the other was red. At this moment, when he saw the divine pattern tree, he could not help but laugh. A divine tree that I have never seen before. It is not on the list. Interesting. That divine tree will belong to me, the spiritual emperor. Chapter 952. The energy reaction is getting stronger and stronger. Part of the barrier has been destroyed by the internal energy. Billions of miles away, Yin Nuashing was increasing his speed desperately in the void. The flashing mark between his eyebrows told him that something big seemed to be happening there, but he couldn't get to the scene immediately. He had a kind of space transmission formation that could transmit him to any place he had seen or sensed as long as there was enough energy. However, he obviously didn't have such a huge amount of energy for such a long distance. Half an hour ago, he sensed that there was a problem with the magic formation and several layers of energy barriers. He could feel that the energy over there was gathering crazily, and there was a hole in the barrier of the void from the inside. Shortly after he sensed this, the outer defense barrier and magic formation were attacked by a powerful force. Those attacks were all from divine weapons. He couldn't be more familiar with that kind of energy, because he had a lot of it on him, and this time, it wasn't just the energy that brushed past him, but a real head-on attack. The violent energy hit his defensive magic formation like raindrops. Some of the energy reactions were as high as that of mid-level gods, and they were all divine weapons of the 5th or 6th level of the divine level. Although the person who launched such an attack wasn't at the level of a divine weapon and couldn't exert 60% of the power, there were too many of them. Even though he had a thorough understanding of the royal god diagram and could use it to the point of perfection, and was said to be able to block the full blow of an emperor god, he couldn't stand being bombarded by so much energy. The number of attacks was probably the number of people in the entire Yin-Yang world, right? Piles of energy from divine weapons. He sensed more than 1,000 kinds of energy from the energy forms fed back, and they were all divine weapons. He didn't expect that there would be a day when he would be bombarded by divine weapons. Yin Nuashing suddenly slapped his forehead and said with a sudden realization, "That's right, If 9 kinds of divine level and above divine level are used at full force, that world can't bear it at all. Even the barrier of the void has become illusory because of the impact of the girls. F***CK. How could he still make such a low-level mistake after so many years? He should have left the formation book there and launched a magic formation of the divine level or above. After all, he really didn't expect that Yin and the others would be able to make that level of divine art operate at full power so quickly before they had even reached the entry level. If this was in the ancient times, even high-level gods might not be able to do it. Idiot! 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 Yun Nuoxing slapped his forehead in exasperation. He was very annoyed. Brother, don't slap it. It's not good if it's damaged. Little purple soul quickly, and try to persuade him. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He only felt pain in his liver, stomach, and all over his body. After a while, his expression became gloomy again. He didn't know what had happened over there. Since the barrier of the void had been blurry, the tree of divine pattern should have been exposed. Xian and the others might also be there. Maybe the tree of divine pattern had attracted the people of the yin-yang world. In terms of the function of the tree of divine pattern, it was equivalent to half of a divine body. Its value couldn't be lower than the 3 divine trees on the list of heaven and earth treasures. Xian and the others are cultivating inside. There are several layers of barriers, so they shouldn't be affected. But the group of people who attacked obviously didn't care about this. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flashed slightly. Thinking of this, his face became even gloomier. To put it bluntly, this kind of attempt to interrupt other people's cultivation was like killing one's father. If he hadn't been so suspicious and left many formations to guard against all kinds of accidents, Xian and the others might have been awakened from their deep cultivation state. Failing to cultivate was a small matter. If the energy in their bodies was disturbed and they went crazy, it would endanger their lives. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. His eyes gradually turned cold. He whispered in his heart, "Maggots, they're all maggots." That low murmur did not have any fluctuations, but in that instant, he felt as if he had entered Xuanyue's body from several dozen epochs ago. That gloomy voice caused the women in the soul world to tremble when they heard it. They looked at each other, and Zi shook his head, indicating that things had not reached that stage yet. 1 hour. We'll be there in 1 hour. Before that, you must hold on for me. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flashed with faint madness. The 12 elements in his body also let out a monstrous roar, as if they were going to fight together with their master. In the yin-yang sky, the energy concentration at the energy tide had dropped to a certain level. This world began to become clear. The 2 thick energy clouds above his head also became very thin. The energy in this area had been sucked dry. Moonlight gradually appeared in the yin-yang sky. Rumble. Under the moonlight, monstrous energy connected into a large area and smashed down like a mountain. Fire, ice, earth, thunder, and storm. Except for the light and dark elements, the energy of the 8 elements was complete. They intertwined into an elemental curtain and bombarded the distorted energy barrier. Waves of energy surged out, and the shock wave destroyed the area within 100 miles. In the center of the energy bombardment, inside the energy barrier, the golden divine pattern tree was extremely dazzling. The figures of Xian and the others could be seen. The energy light beam was so vast that it even broke through the barrier and was exposed to the outside sky. The weak law disturbance could be vaguely seen from thousands of miles away. This place was surrounded, from God's Son to God's King, to God's Emperor's God's Emperor's God's Emperor's God's Son. It was unknown how many races there were. Not only the human race, but also the demon race. Moreover, there were quite a lot of them. They were evenly matched with the human race. They all looked like humans, but they all had the characteristics of demon beasts. In Emoyan's words, they had long horns, long tails, wings, and no ears. At this moment, they didn't fight against each other because they had a common goal. No one recognized the divine pattern tree, but just from its function and divine nature, it was enough to make many people green with greed. especially when they saw that the 9 people sitting under the tree had not woken up. The greed in their hearts rose to the extreme. Although the outer tortoise shell was extremely hard, it could still be broken. Once it was broken, the 9 people inside would have nowhere to hide, and the divine pattern tree would also fall into the hands of the crowd. Emperor Ling stood not far away, watching the crowd attack the barrier. His aura surged, and the people around him didn't dare to come close. He looked at the golden divine pattern tree, then looked at the 9 people below, and a cruel smile appeared on his face. However, when he looked at the barrier, he frowned. Hundreds of divine level 4 or 5 divine weapons couldn't break through the barrier so quickly. Could it be a divine level 8 array? Emperor Ling's eyes flickered. He was a very cautious person. After discovering the divine pattern tree, he had already sent a message to his faction, asking them to send some people over. He believed that many people around him had done the same thing, such as the godly emperors. After a while, his gaze stopped at a place in the crowd. He suddenly smiled faintly. Interesting, they're here too. However, this divine pattern tree will belong to me. At this place, energy surged into the sky. The pillars of energy were thick and majestic, breaking through the clouds and connecting to the sky. Hundreds of thousands of strong cultivators were eyeing the barrier covetously. Many of them were secretly conserving their strength. At this time, those who attacked the barrier would be exhausted and lose the qualification to compete. In the sky, many arrays were formed. The divine weapons resonated with each other. Huge energy waves crashed onto the barrier like raindrops. If it were ordinary attacks, no matter how strong they were, they wouldn't be able to threaten the Imperial God diagram. However, those attacks were from divine weapons. Divine weapons were much stronger and more destructive. Even if it was a barrier that could defend against godly emperors, it would still break after being hit by thousands of mid-level divine weapons. It wasn't a matter of whether it could break or not. It was a matter of time. The shocking energy explosion lasted for a long time. Those who joined forces to attack were all out of breath. They had no choice but to switch to other people with divine artifacts to continue attacking. However, everyone only saw ripples splashing out from the magic array. It trembled from time to time, but there was no sign of it being broken. Firepower from all directions flooded this place. If one stood inside and looked outside, they would see that the world seemed to be burning. Those with sharp eyes noticed that there seemed to be many new faces here. They seemed to have just arrived. They were all godly kings and godly emperors, which made their hearts tremble. They hurriedly took out jade slips and asked the forces behind them to send reinforcements. If things went wrong, a bloody battle would break out here. Since no one was maintaining the defense, the divine reigning diagram, which was automatically activated, finally began to dim after being worn down for a long time. The golden light of the barrier dimmed slightly, and an arm-length crack appeared at the top. The appearance of the crack caused many people to be stunned. Soon after, wild joy erupted from their eyes. The barrier is about to break. With this shout, the people wielding divine artifacts became full of vigor, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. They wielded their divine artifacts and launched a barrage of attacks at the barrier below, causing the barrier of the Imperial God diagram to tremble for a moment. Moreover, many people aimed at the crack and launched powerful attacks one after another in an attempt to expand the crack and cause the barrier to collapse. On the ground, on top of a huge boulder, the little white beast stood between the cracks of the boulder. When it saw the earth-shattering attacks, it was so scared that its whole body trembled. The appearance of the divine pattern tree had attracted everyone's attention away from it, which is a good thing for it. However, it was suddenly worried about the people inside the barrier, so it hesitated. Woo-woo! The white small beast anxiously walked in circles in the crack on the huge rock. It didn't know what to do. With so many experts outside, it would only be courting death if it ran out. Although they had drawn their attention away from it, it didn't mean that no one was concerned about it. When it saw more and more cracks on the barrier, it spun even faster. It sounded very anxious. Just when the crack had spread halfway through the barrier, an energy that made the heavens and earth tremble burst out from the void. Stop! Suddenly, a thunderous roar rang out from the void. Divine light descended from the void. That voice rang out in everyone's ears, causing them to be taken aback for a moment. However, no one stopped. Instead, they increased the strength of their attacks. I'll let all of you. Yun Nuoxing's figure directly rushed out from the void. She appeared at the top of the barrier with surging energy that didn't stop. She suddenly clapped her hands together. Stop! She clapped her hands together and suddenly opened them. When her palms came together, a ball of pale, white energy suddenly appeared. An energy wave suddenly spread out at a speed faster than light. The invisible energy wave caused all the energy that came into contact with it to be extinguished in an instant. Even the energy that was exploding disappeared in an instant, leaving behind only dust. Bang! 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 The energy of the divine weapons that were gathering energy suddenly dissipated when they came into contact with the shockwave. The divine weapons became unstable and exploded with a bang. However, not even a trace of energy was released from the explosion. They were only damaged. This time, dozens of divine weapons of divine rank level 5 or 6 were destroyed. Even the energy in everyone's body became sluggish. Those who were still circulating energy suddenly lost their energy, causing them to groan and spit out a mouthful of blood. They were actually devoured by their own energy. Those who didn't use their energy escaped the disaster. The energy vacuum. Yun Nuoxing directly caused all the energy in this area to disappear. For a short time, this area was in a state of no energy. However, there was still a large amount of energy here. Therefore, it only lasted for a few seconds before returning to normal. Ling Huang's expression was gloomy. He was also affected by the energy vacuum just now. At this time, there was still a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. He suddenly turned his cold gaze and looked at the top of the barrier. There, a colorful figure appeared. He was sure that before the energy vacuum exploded, there was definitely no such person there. Everyone also realized that their condition was abnormal. Although the energy vacuum affected many people and caused at least 30% of them to spit out blood, they weren't seriously injured. They recovered after a short rest. It was just that the energy in their bodies was a little chaotic. When they stabilized themselves, they looked at the golden barrier. At this time, with the return of Yun Nuoxing, the royal god diagram was already in the process of self-healing. The crack that appeared after being bombarded by everyone for a few hours showed signs of closing again. Everyone saw Yun Nuoxing immediately. Their gazes froze, and they looked at each other for a while. Suddenly, they raised the divine weapons in their hands, and energy suddenly bloomed. Rumble. The wild energy once again descended on the barrier of the royal god diagram. In an instant, Yun Nuoxing's face was covered in dust. Percent asterisk and at asterisk. Yun Nuoxing was furious. This bastard didn't give her any face. She asked him to stop, but he still ruthlessly smashed the energy over. Last, go down first. Yun Nuoxing carried little purple soul down from his shoulder. With a wave of his hand, a gentle breeze carried her slowly to the ground. Little purple soul nodded obediently. Okay. Be careful, big brother. Even if Yun Nuoxing didn't say it, she knew what he wanted to do. However, Yun Nuoxing wasn't in a good state at this time. Not only was he travel-worn, he wasn't in his best condition. Xian and the others were rarely in a deep state of cultivation. It was a pity that putting away the divine pattern tree would interrupt their cultivation. However, without the divine pattern tree, his strength would be reduced by at least 40%. The reception spirit divine body had an advantage that no one could match. He could use every bit of energy to the greatest extent and unleash at least 4 or 5 times the power. As for ordinary people, at most, they could only unleash 100% of the power of their energy. This was also the reason why Yun Nuoxing could use a divine-grade profound technique without batting an eyelid, and his strength was so strong that it was exaggerated. Now that the divine pattern tree was gone, his advantage was greatly reduced. However, he didn't really care. If he still needed to use his full strength to deal with this group of small fries, then he, Yin Nuoxing, wouldn't be worthy of being called a heavenly god, although he had long lost his position as a heavenly god. If you don't stop, I'll make your entire bodies stop moving. A cold voice drifted in the air. Yin Nuoxing's expression was cold and solemn. His figure flashed and suddenly appeared in the crowd outside. He appeared in front of a godly venerable expert holding a divine weapon. Without saying a word, he threw a punch. The surging energy on his fist even condensed into a solid form. What? That godly venerable expert was shocked. He grabbed his divine weapon and tried to defend himself. However, Yin Nuoxing was too fast. The power of the light element made his attack impossible to guard against. The godly venerable expert was smashed into pieces before he could finish his sentence. After finishing off a godly venerable expert with a single punch, Yin Nuoxing's expression was cold. He put away the divine weapon. He didn't care about mid-level divine weapons and wouldn't put them into his divine body. However, he had other uses for them. Buzz! A huge beam of energy shot towards his face. It was extremely bright. It was a pure energy attack from a divine weapon. It caused the space to tremble. Yin Nuoxing turned around and extended his palm to block the energy beam. The spiritual divine body's ability to devour energy was still there. He didn't need the help of the divine pattern tree. All the energy attacks that were directed at him were just replenishing his energy. It just so happens that my energy carrier is a little empty after my long journey back. After devouring the huge energy torrent, Yin Nuoxing clenched his fist and took a deep breath. This surge of energy allowed him to return to his peak. He looked at the person who attacked him. That person was shocked when he saw that Yin Nuoxing wasn't injured at all. His eyes were filled with shock. The light particles disappeared in a flash. Yin Nuoxing appeared behind that person and gently struck out with his palm. To thank you, please rest in peace. Boom! Unparalleled energy burst out, directly turning that expert into dust. Yin Nuoxing put away his divine tool and raised his eyes to look around. This battle happened in a small area, and not many people paid attention to it. Almost everyone was still attacking the Imperial God diagram, as if it didn't exist. That ferocious battle record was not witnessed by anyone. Hiss! Yin Nuoxing's eyes turned cold. He let out a hissing sound like a snake. A black ice aura quietly flowed out from his body. In his hand, a ball of black and ice blue energy appeared. It quickly fused and took shape in an instant. Then it exploded out at the speed of light. The icy blue and black energy ripples suddenly spread to the ends of the world. Two loud roars were heard in an instant. Dark, mysterious ice. Snow goddess. Frozen world. As the two shouts rang out, the sound of space freezing suddenly rang out. The land within a radius of 1,000 miles suddenly turned into black ice. The mountain range turned into an ice mountain. All the energy between heaven and earth maintained its final form as it was frozen within the black ice. Even those experts were all sealed within the black ice. The entire world suddenly quieted down. Only Yin Nuoxing was left standing in the middle of the thousands of ice blocks. It was incomparably dazzling as it condensed the light of the entire world. In the frozen world, black snowflakes drifted down. It was as if they had really come to a frozen world. Even the energy of the yin-yang sky was frozen. Yin Nuoxing gasped for breath. Without the divine mark, the burden of using a high-level divine technique was not small. His colorful hair turned white. Moreover, boom! In the frozen world, an extremely hot flame suddenly burst out. The green flame was like a giant flame beast. The energy that erupted in an instant caused the black ice to fluctuate violently. Bang! After the green flame erupted, the space began to tremble violently. Streaks of scarlet flames soared into the sky and surged out from the black ice. The terrifying temperature, together with the shockwave that contained terrifying temperature and power, caused the ice-sealed world to tremble. At this moment, the others also began to circulate the divine origin in their bodies and joined forces to attack the ice-sealed domain. After Yin Nuoshing gasped for breath, he couldn't help but sigh when he saw that the place was on the verge of collapse. Moreover, the power was much weaker. When there was the divine mark, the dark mysterious ice could seal divine gods and deities, making them unable to resist. At this moment, even divine kings and divine emperors could not be completely frozen. Although there were too many people, the main reason was that the divine mark was not there and the strength of the energy was reduced. Even so, it's not a problem to trap them for a while. It will reduce their strength more or less. Yin Nuoshing muttered to himself for a while. His eyes were gloomy. He clenched his fist, and lightning jumped on his arm. His colorful hair fluttered behind him and stood up. A huge lightning power appeared on his body. He waved his hand, and the lightning shot up to the sky. Buzz! The lightning stopped in midair. After pausing for a second, it suddenly spread out. The power of the lightning quickly evolved in the sky and formed a huge lightning array. It enveloped the entire world. Lightning that contained various elemental energies gathered in the sky and jumped on the array. It was like a group of dragons roaring. Rumble! A huge lightning power came down from the sky. Those who were attacking the frozen domain were stunned. They quickly increased their speed to attack the domain. If the lightning came down from the sky, there would definitely be heavy casualties. Everyone! Yin Nuoshing laughed and opened his arms. Half of his colorful hair turned white. I invite all of you to ascend to the immortal realm together. Rumble! The colorful lightning fell from the sky. The huge lightning power made everyone's face turn pale. Chapter 953. Things happened very quickly. Before that, no one had noticed the Yun Nuo planet. The battlefield was very large. The energy storm swept thousands of feet, tens of thousands of feet. The entire world seemed to be burning. Under the background of the raging flames, the size of a person was too small. It was so small that he was directly ignored by others. It was not until the whole world quieted down that everyone noticed the slender, colorful figure. Their eyes were filled with horror. No one had thought that such a thing would happen before the situation became like this. The originally fiery scene suddenly became cold. This scene did not last for long. Those who were trapped in the ice crazily activated their divine origin and various kinds of energy to resonate with the divine artifact. Waves of violent energy burst out from the black ice. The ice, which was the size of a person, was quickly covered with cracks. Just as they were continuously attacking the dark, mysterious ice, that person's hand shook again, and an extremely large array appeared in the sky. The terrifying might of thunder and lightning pressed down from the sky, causing everyone's scalps to tingle. They attacked the icebound world even more crazily. That thunder and lightning array clearly wanted to attack indiscriminately. If it smashed down like this, there would probably be no life left within 100 miles. Bang! Bang! The sound of ice shattering was very loud. Figures walked out from the ice-sealed world. Their surging auras soared into the sky and formed energy light pillars. Most of these people were divine kings and divine emperors. They were the top existences among the younger generation in Kuan-Yuan region. At this moment, they looked up at Yin Nuoshing in the sky with an unfriendly expression. They stared at the array in the sky solemnly and did not show any signs of fear. It seems like you have not given up yet. Yin Nuoshing looked at the dozens of people indifferently and said indifferently. His gaze was somewhat indifferent. Everyone looked at him with a dignified expression. The energy aura on their bodies became increasingly stronger. A mere demigod dares to spout nonsense here? Do you not put the experts of Kuan Plain in your eyes? A tall figure sneered as he took a step forward with his arms crossed. All the spiritual treasures in the world belong to those who are fated to obtain them. You're being too overbearing. On the other side, a powerhouse with scales on his cheeks walked out. His drooping right hand had turned into a huge claw due to the surging energy. Clearly, he was a powerhouse of the demon race. Pooh! Upon hearing this, Yin Nuashing could not help but burst out laughing. She covered her forehead and laughed so hard that her entire body was trembling. Everyone was baffled by her laughter. Maggot! In the end, Yin Nuashing only used these two words to reply to the demon clan's expert. Many people's faces immediately turned gloomy. They were the top experts among the younger generation of Kuan Yuan and the demon clan. Today, they were being looked down upon by a demigod. Arrogant brat. Today, I'll teach you how to respect the experts. The tall figure roared and dashed out from where he was. His speed was so fast that he left after images in the air. The muscles on his body bulged like mountains. The earth element was thick and heavy on his body, giving him an unparalleled sense of heaviness. He punched the space, and a huge fist mark with heavy divine origin tore through the space. Yin Nuashing raised her right hand gently, and small arrays appeared near her wrist. A suction force burst out from her palm and sucked the fist mark in the air. Then she pulled her right hand to the side and flung the fist mark away. Roar! Roar! A loud roar came from the side. It was like an ancient giant beast's roar that shook heaven and earth, causing the space to tremble. A huge figure with bone spikes on his back suddenly rushed over. His arms were covered with a layer of thick black hair. His entire body rushed towards Yun Nua planet like a cannonball. Clang! A fist the size of a cattail hassock was waved in the air. The sound of metal clashing could be heard, and the space was shaking. Before the fist came close, the air was compressed into an air cannon and blasted out with a bang. Yin Nuashing leaned to the side and dodged the air cannon that was 100 feet long. Then, her right hand charged forward. Several arrays covered her hand and elements surged. Then, she blasted out a punch. Bang! Two disproportionate fists collided with each other. The powerful energy formed a weak shock wave and shattered the space. Yin Nuashing's arm shook and the arrays lit up. A huge force sent the tall and sturdy figure flying with a punch. Everyone's expression changed. Two people had already made a move. Both of them were divine kings. For a demigod, they should be able to crush him. Why did it turn out like this? That huge figure rushed over like a cannonball and was also sent flying like a cannonball. He broke the sound barrier and shattered the space. Huh! The figure let out a roar as the energy in his body trembled. He released all of his strength, causing the surrounding space to shatter. He lowered his head and looked at his palm in surprise. Strength was his forte. His clan's physical strength was one of the strongest among the demon clan. He had never been sent flying by a punch before. This made him very interested in the Yun Nua planet. A rumbling voice rang out. I am Gu Qi from the Demon Bone clan. Who are you? You don't need to know. Yin Nuashing glanced at him and snapped her fingers with her left hand. She muttered softly, 10,000 thunderbolts. Boom! Following a soft sound, the enormous formation in the sky rumbled with thunder and lightning. Then, tens of thousands of feet of thunder fell from the sky, bringing with it the power to destroy the heavens and earth. It completely submerged the entire area. Endless thunderbolts, tens of thousands of rays of light, elemental heavenly thunder, and all kinds of energy burst out in the form of thunderbolts. It was no longer just simple bolts of lightning. Instead, it was a sea of thunderbolts that fell from the sky like raindrops. It was extremely dazzling. Even if one was standing 1,000 miles away, they could clearly feel the destructive power here. Needless to say, the people who were wrapped in the thunderbolts array were blinding and suffocating. Boom! Boom! Ah! Along with the sound of thunder, there was a heart-wrenching scream. Those who were unable to break free from the dark, mysterious ice were turned into ashes by the concentrated fire of several thunderbolts, even though they were holding divine artifacts. Their souls were scattered. Wong. Unparalleled energy fell from the sky, and the place boiled instantly. Even though the people present were all young experts from the Kuan Yuan region and the Demon Clan, such thunderbolts could even kill mid-level gods. Those who were trapped in the dark, mysterious ice could not even defend themselves. In just a few seconds, dozens of dark, mysterious ice exploded. Almost all of the people inside had their souls scattered. Those who were lucky enough to survive were charred black and fell to the ground. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Their bodies were still overflowing with colorful thunderbolts. Roar! Gucci's burly figure passed through the dense thunderbolts. His huge fist directly smashed a descending red thunderbolt. He rushed to the front of Yin Nuoxing and directly engaged in close combat with her. Yin Nuoxing looked indifferent. The thunderbolt's array did not require her real-time control. She was invincible in it and could still use many tricks. She turned around and clashed her hands with Gucci's fists. It was like two meteors colliding. In the place where the thunderbolts fell, there was a shocking collision of energy that was not inferior to the thunderbolts. Bang! 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 The two of them exchanged blows very quickly. However, in terms of speed, Yin Nuoxing was faster. After more than 10 rounds, the bone spurs on his back and arms were broken. Yin Nuoxing directly pierced through his chest with her claws. Blood spurted out from his back. Roar! The mountain-like figure let out a painful roar. His mournful roar was drowned out by the thunderbolts. The black hair all over his body stood up as if he had been electrocuted. With a wave of her hand, Gucci was sent flying backward. Gucci coughed up a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. He was hit by another thunderbolt. His whole body was char-black like a piece of coal. The Demon Bone Clan's body is extremely hard. Their bones are even more indestructible. I didn't expect him to lose in a collision of strength. Who are you? The eyes of a demon race elite flashed. There was an energy shield above his head. The thunderbolts avoided the area around him and could not touch him. Yin Nuoxing glanced at him. With a thought, a part of the thunderbolt's array in the sky suddenly collapsed and split into a small array. The surrounding thunderbolts quickly gathered there. After a while, a huge rainbow-colored thunderbolt suddenly fell from the sky. Boom! The rainbow-colored thunderbolt crashed into the energy shield above the person's head. Such a powerful thunderbolt force made it impossible for him to dodge. He could only take it head-on. The energy shield flickered rapidly. It's useless. I'm from a Blood Thunder clan, one of the few demon races that can control the power of thunderbolts. Your thunderbolt force is terrifying, but it can't penetrate my defense, the demon race elite said indifferently. Is that so? Yin Nuoxing looked at him indifferently. She raised her right hand and snapped her fingers. The expression of the Blood Lightning clan expert trembled as an extremely terrifying feeling of threat made all the hairs on his body stand on end. When he lifted his head, he saw a dark and deep thunderbolt suddenly appear behind the thunderbolt. It was swallowing and spitting out an aura of annihilation, causing his pupils to shrink to the size of a needle. Boom! That thunderbolt contained the speed of light. When he raised his head and saw it, it had already arrived and shattered his defense. The thunderbolt penetrated the ground and blasted a huge crater. The Blood Thunder clan expert was lying in the middle of the crater with blood all over his body. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He had actually been defeated by the thunderbolt. Yin Nuoxing glanced at him. The light element was about to surge. She was about to chase after the Blood Thunder clan elite and end his life. Thunderbolts had little effect on him. Swoosh! Suddenly, a crescent moon soared into the sky amidst the energy thunderstorm. It was mixed with the roar of tigers and howls of wolves. It pierced the sound of the thunderbolts. Several figures passed through the thunderbolts like ghosts and pounced on the Blood Thunder clan elite. Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened as 3 gigantic thunderbolts descended from the sky. They were like 3 gigantic energy light pillars that connected the heavens and the earth, directly covering the group of people within. Then, the colorful thunderbolts in the surrounding area all gathered madly towards that direction. Poof! Poof! Several blood flowers bloomed. They were annihilated in the middle of the thunderbolts. Not even dregs were left behind. Yin Nuoxing stood in the sky amidst the flashing thunderbolts. She looked down at everyone with her cold eyes. The brilliance of the thunderbolts shone on her body, making her look like the god of thunder. Where did this guy get so much energy? It's inexhaustible. Not far away, a gust of wind sounded. A young man descended. He crossed his arms and looked at Yin Nuashing. He said, "Are you one of the 9 kings of the divine prefecture, or one of the 8 kings of Taiyuan? Interesting. You're only a demigod, but you can make so many experts helpless. Your body is extremely powerful, and your control of energy is comparable to that of a mid-level god." The gust of wind sounded all around. One figure after another descended. They densely covered the heavens and the earth, surrounding Yin Nuashing in the center. These people were not afraid of the thunderbolts above their heads. None of them was weak. "What's the point of being so timid? Tell me your name if you have the guts." A ferocious-looking human expert stared at her and laughed coldly. "Ha ha, such a beautiful little sister. I can't bear to lay my hands on her." Not far away, an enchanting figure casually caught a thunderbolt that swept past her and played with it in the palm of her hand. "I, the Demon Spirit Clan, would like to learn from you." A figure wrapped in black fog let out a sinister laugh. That laughter caused the expressions of many human race experts to change. Demon Spirit Clan? How could she appear here so openly? Yin Nuashing glanced at them indifferently. She folded her hands in front of her and said, "Is there no one else? That's all." "Oh, this little girl is very arrogant." One of them couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yin Nuashing nodded and said, "If there's no one else, then you can go on your way. If you travel together, you won't be too lonely on the road to the underworld." "Don't you want to know my name? I'll tell you now." Yin Nuashing stared at the earth. Those thunderbolts had blasted countless holes in the ground, turning the earth into a scene of devastation. At this time, the energy that had gathered in the earth gradually surged. Rumble, the earth shook loudly. Everyone was shocked. They could feel that there was an immeasurable amount of energy crazily gathering under the earth. The magnitude of the energy made their expressions change drastically. "Not good. Retreat." It was unknown who shouted, but the sky suddenly turned violet. However, before they could retreat, a huge azure array suddenly appeared on the ground. At the same time, the thunderbolt array in the sky collapsed, turning into blue light spots that poured into the array on the ground. A wave of energy that was so dense that it almost manifested as stars appeared in this world. "My name is Ling. I'm the embodiment of the sky. I am equal to the earth." Rumbling sounds echoed as the energy density in the air soared, causing everyone's faces to turn deathly pale. They hurriedly used their strongest defenses to protect themselves. In the sky, a dazzling cross-shaped star had appeared out of nowhere. The moment everyone saw that star, it suddenly exploded, and a huge azure pillar of starlight fell from the sky. It was like a brilliant, eternal light that illuminated everyone's dumbfounded faces. "My body is energy. I am the representative of energy in this world. I am the ruler of energy. My name is Divine Physique Na Ling." Rumble. A huge starlight pillar fell from the sky and landed in Yin-Yang sky with a great force. Huge halos surrounded the starlight pillar. The unparalleled power drowned the world and swallowed everyone. The shock wave with destructive energy swept out into the distance. Pieces of space collapsed, and the black void space also fluctuated. The energy of Yin-Yang sky made this space very strong, but it couldn't prevent it from being blasted into a huge basin. The mountain range was melted. The extremely brilliant starlight pillar made the world change color, and the people farther away were stunned. The starlight pillar came and went quickly. It didn't last long. The azure energy pillar trembled slightly and disappeared. In its place, there was a huge basin that had been blasted into 100,000 feet wide. It affected the area inside and outside Yin-Yang sky, and the mountains collapsed. It had to be said that the space and earth here were very strong. If it were the Ghost Forest and the Divine Tiger Mountain Villa, there would be 2 huge pits now. In Yin-Yang sky, there was only a basin. However, the part that was out of Yin-Yang sky was still blasted into an abyss. Except for that place of cultivation, the other places had been turned into basins. Yin Nuashing stood in the sky. Half of his colorful hair turned snow white. Suddenly, his expression froze. He looked at the basin below. He actually sensed a large wave of life. This was inconceivable. In his current state, the Star's Fall attack was enough to destroy an emperor of the underworld. Even an emperor of the gods would be injured if he was careless. However, below him, there were still so many survivors. This made his expression change slightly. The human clan's spirit-receiving divine body lives up to its reputation. If it weren't for our clan's treasure, we would have died today. A demon clan expert held a golden scepter in his hand, exuding terrifying energy. However, the scepter's color was dim at this time. It seemed that it had consumed too much energy. The golden barrier that enveloped everyone flickered twice and then disappeared. This was a very powerful divine artifact. However, after withstanding the Starfall attack, its energy was exhausted. As soon as the identity of the spirit-receiving divine body was exposed, many people's expressions changed. They had heard of the demon clan experts before, but there was no hostility. The younger generation of the human clan, Kuan Yuan, looked at each other and saw some inexplicable confusion in each other's eyes. No wonder he was so tyrannical. It turned out that this guy was really domineering. However, they did not know that Yin Nuoxing rarely showed such a domineering side, unless someone was annoyed by him, or like today, he actually tried to break his array formation. If you leave now, I can still spare your lives. No, wait. Yin Nuoxing lowered his head, looked at the barrier behind him, and said, "Fortunately, you didn't disturb them. Otherwise, none of you will be able to leave today." Hey, the human clan's spirit-receiving divine body is really bold. However, he is also qualified to do so. At this moment, his combat strength is enough to look down on the younger generation of the world. The demon clan expert smiled faintly. Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to say something, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the sky, startling him. A faint sense of dread emerged in his heart. He was about to use the light element to move out, but his body stiffened as if he was restricted by something. "Huh!" Yin Nuoxing shouted loudly. The star power in his body surged violently and instantly broke through the layer of restriction. However, before he could rush out, a huge pagoda descended from the sky and swallowed him, suppressing him within the pagoda. "Why are you talking so much nonsense with him? Everyone, help me refine him. The divine tree behind him will be ours." The human clan expert, with a ferocious face, said coldly. A portion of the demon clan experts frowned, while the other portion sneered inwardly. Clearly, they were disdainful of this method. However, they didn't say anything. They poured all of their energy into the purple pagoda, which was hundreds of meters tall. The pagoda immediately burned with brilliant purple flames. "You want to refine me with this weak level 6 divine artifact?" A cold laughter suddenly came from the pagoda. However, this laughter was more or less devoid of warmth. "This pagoda of mine is a space of its own. Even deities can be sucked into it. Once you enter the pagoda, you can refine everything in less than half an hour. Even if you want to refine an entire world, it won't be a problem." The human clan expert sneered. Yin Nuoxing let out a low laugh. Then his aura surged wildly. The violent aura caused the purple pagoda to tremble violently. The light dimmed, as if it wasn't imprisoning a person, but a world-destroying divine beast that could destroy the world. The violent aura that came from the pagoda made people's hearts palpitate. Even the body of the pagoda started to distort faintly. The human clan expert was shocked. He hurriedly said, "Everyone, help me." Clang, buzz. However, before the others could do anything, the middle section of the pagoda suddenly swelled up like an inflated balloon. The surrounding space also shook continuously, forming a distorted vortex. "Oh, this power! Your pagoda is about to explode." Everyone was shocked. Boom! A cold light streaked across the heavens and earth as the purple pagoda was split into two with a bang. Yin Nuoxing slowly walked out from within as purple flames that overflowed into the sky swept across the plains behind him. Lightning coiled around his body as his half-white hair returned to normal. He had directly devoured the energy within the pagoda and once again returned to his peak state. 6 wings appeared on his back as divine light shone from his eyes. He was like a demon god as he slowly walked out. "Now, it's your turn," he murmured softly. The ferocious-looking man turned pale with fright. Just as he was about to retreat, he saw a flash of light. The face that was originally far away suddenly appeared in front of him. The eyes that were glowing with divine light stared at him. It made him feel a sense of reincarnation. Even his mind was about to sink into it. Boom! The man's head was grabbed and slammed into the ground. His body twitched, and he immediately stopped moving. Those who used the pagoda to refine him also suffered a backlash. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and suffered injuries that were neither light nor heavy. Buzz! At this moment, a huge silver palm print suddenly appeared in the sky. It was as heavy as a mountain. The majestic power caused the expressions of the surrounding people to change. They hurriedly retreated. Yin Nuashing looked up at the huge palm print in the sky and sneered, "If you don't stop, I'll kill you until you stop." Chapter 954. The huge handprint came crashing down with the force of a mountain. Before the palm arrived, the wind from the palm had already arrived. The huge force caused Yin Nuashing's robes to flap loudly. Her colorful hair danced wildly, and the ground rumbled under the force of the palm. Ding! Yin Nuashing extended his right hand, and the 12 elements rapidly gathered in his palm, forming a huge 2-meter-long sword. From the looks of it, it was no different from the Netherworld Ruin sword. He grabbed the huge sword, and with a soft cry, he slashed out twice without any fancy moves. 2 huge sword rays that were 10,000 feet long shot into the sky at the speed of light. The 2 terrifying forces collided like meteorites under countless gazes. However, the expected explosion of energy did not happen. In the air, there was only a terrifying shockwave that shattered the surrounding space. Following that, the silver-white handprint was suddenly pierced through by the 2 sword rays. The person who had unleashed the silver-white handprint in the sky hurriedly dodged, but he was blown several thousand feet away by the strong wind. However, he was not seriously injured, and he landed not far away calmly. Spiritual Emperor Kuin Yuan. It's him, the prime of his generation. It's said that he is ranked second among the 5 primes of Kuin Yuan. Someone exclaimed. That person had a handsome face, and his long hair and eyes were reddish-black. He looked extremely demonic, and a blazing aura circulated around his body. That strike must have used up a lot of energy, right? Yin Nuashing glanced at him, and immediately saw through the situation that he was hiding under his calm face, and sneered. Spiritual Emperor Kuin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly, but he snorted coldly. He quietly retracted his hand into his sleeve. No one saw that his hand was dripping with boiling blood. It was impossible for him to remain unscathed after withstanding the power of the fusion of the 12 elements. Yin Nuashing did not have time to pay attention to him, because there was another powerful force that was aimed at him from the side. It was filled with cold, killing intent, but he did not say anything. He extended his hand, and the devouring power of the spiritual emperor's divine body erupted. He completely devoured the divine king's full-powered strike, as if the destructive force did not exist at all. What's going on? The God King expert was dumbfounded when he saw that Yin Nuashing's aura had become even denser after a full-powered attack. It is said that all energy attacks are useless against the receiving spirit godly body. They will only become the source of his energy. It seems that it is not bad. Someone revealed the truth. Yin Nuashing wasn't surprised that the reason was exposed. Ever since the day the spiritual, godly physique appeared, this almost lost physique had once again spread throughout the God realm. Most of the information was sealed and would only be open when the time came. With such a famous physique, it was impossible that there wasn't any information left behind. Clang! Clang! In the void, rays of sword light fell like cold rain. They were suffused with cold luster and surged towards Yun Nuashing from all directions. Hundreds of long swords revolved around him, and there were many long swords that suddenly shot out and pierced towards Yun Nuashing from tricky angles. Yun Nuashing was calm and composed. He held two long swords that were condensed from elements and waved them around like the wind. The myriad transformation sword body split into hundreds of shadows and waved them around. It was as if he had waved the giant sword thousands of times in an instant. Those cold, long swords couldn't get close to him, and he could even use his sword aura to tear open gaps in the sword formation. Sword Shadow. Yun Nuashing waved his two swords, creating afterimages. The sword formation that surrounded him couldn't cause any damage to him. He took a deep breath, and the giant sword in his left hand disappeared. He held another giant sword with both hands, and the myriad transformation sword body gradually reduced the frequency of his sword swinging. Many afterimages overlapped with his main body. Then, with a loud shout, rays of sword light that exceeded the limit of speed suddenly burst out. Flowing light. Dozens of sword gleams that far exceeded the speed of light streaked across the sky. Like the might of Ling Hong's sword, the space within a radius of 100 miles suddenly shook and collapsed. On a flat surface, a spatial crack that looked like a circle or a ring appeared. The sword formation that covered the sky was also destroyed in an instant. The moment he saw the moonlight again, Yun Nuashing's eyes shone brightly. Light elements flashed, and he suddenly appeared in the sky. The figure that was hiding in a void was directly pulled out by him. A cold ray of sword light flashed. The speed of light caused many people's expressions to change drastically. This was the light element. It was unstoppable and unrivaled. Clang. However, the expert who used the sword formation was already prepared. He barely managed to block the light-like sword. However, the power of the fusion of 12 elements seeped through the long sword and instantly eroded his weapon and his arm, causing him to be greatly shocked. Yun Nuashing's eyes narrowed. This person's longsword was obviously not an ordinary item. He could even split the pagoda that was at the 6th level of the divine level with a single slash. This longsword would not be any weaker than the pagoda. Boom! Taking advantage of the moment when he blocked the sword, Yun Nuashing let go of the huge sword with both hands. The 12 elements revolved around his palms, illuminating them with brilliant colors. His palms struck the man's lower abdomen as fast as lightning. The expert who used the sword seemed to have suffered a fierce blow. His body flew back over 10,000 feet like an arrow. Along the way, he spat out mouthfuls of blood. His aura was weak. Trying to escape, Yun Nuashing shouted. The elements condensed into a colorful longbow, and he instantly nocked an arrow. Suddenly, a powerful force was born in his senses. Yun Nuashing's expression froze. He hurriedly dispersed the longbow and arrow in his hands and dodged the attack. On the spot where he stood, a spear light bloomed to the extreme. It was like a fiery bird streaking across the sky, burning a huge hole in the space. He could still eat pure energy directly. For example, he was not afraid of the flames refined by the pagoda and the torrent of energy just now. However, this spear light contained too much destructive power. In a situation where he did not have any divine patterns, he would more or less be injured if he swallowed it. Tisk, Yun Nuashing smacked his lips and gave up on the severely injured expert. He waved his huge sword and charged forward like a demon god. The energy in his body surged violently. Clang! The spear light vibrated with powerful echoes and smashed onto Yun Nuashing's wings, causing him to stagger. Then, he was hit by another palm strike. His body flew over 10 meters and only stopped after flapping his wings. Bastard, I have tolerated you for a long time. Yun Nuashing's eyes lit up. He realized that the one holding the spear was actually Spiritual Emperor Kuan Yuan. Just now, Spiritual Emperor Kuan Yuan attacked him with a palm strike, stopped him from killing the sword-wielding expert, and even took advantage of the chaos to shoot him with a spear. This made him furious. The sound of energy explosions was incessant. Many people shouted and attacked, shouting the names of their mystic arts. There were also people who smashed down with their divine weapons. The energy raindrops connected together. Yin Nuoxing's eyes froze. He hugged his 6 wings in front of him, and a colorful energy barrier was instantly formed. Rumble! The raindrops of energy fell on the colorful barrier, creating thousands of energy ripples. However, they were unable to shake it. Taking advantage of the moment when the attack was blocked, Yin Nuoxing's 6 wings trembled. The light element was unleashed to the extreme. His entire body turned into a ray of divine light and shot towards spiritual Emperor Kuan Yuan. A loud shout resounded through the sky. Light shadow flash. Before his voice could be heard, he had already arrived in front of spiritual Emperor Kuan Yuan with a majestic aura. The colorful sword in his hand ruthlessly pierced through spiritual Emperor Kuan Yuan's body. The sound of the giant sword tearing flesh caused countless people's hearts to tremble. Then, before everyone could see clearly, they saw an even more powerful energy erupt. Half of spiritual Emperor Kuan Yuan's body was blown to pieces. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Even his fiery red spear was shattered. Die! Yin Nuoxing roared. The giant sword in his hand descended from the sky with an earth-shattering aura. It was like a huge divine sword descending from the heavens, slashing towards spiritual Emperor Kuan Yuan. Spiritual Emperor Kuan Yuan was shocked. Even though half of his body was shattered, he was still alive. When he saw the earth-shattering sword, his face turned pale. He hurriedly took out a jade slip and crushed it. The surrounding space suddenly collapsed, forming a spatial tunnel that was about to take him away. Don't even think about escaping. The giant sword in his hand emitted an incomparably bright light. A sword light that was tens of thousands of zhonglong burst out with an annihilating aura. It was like a sea wave that swept over 100,000 zhonglong in just a blink of an eye. Under the horrified gaze of Spirit Emperor Kuan Yuan, it rumbled and swallowed him whole. Both his body and soul melted into the incomparable energy of the sword light. Many experts hurriedly dodged the energy sword light, afraid that they would be swallowed. Wherever the rainbow-colored sword light passed, only a black abyss was left. It was bottomless, as if it led to the 9th hell. Everyone's face twitched. Kuan Yuan's spiritual emperor had completely disappeared. The sovereign of Kuan Yuan's generation has died in battle. Everyone gasped. A young sovereign had died in battle just like that. However, many people had died here today, and they were all experts of the younger generation. After using the Netherworld Void Slash, more than half of Yin Nuoxing's hair had turned white. The Netherworld Void Sword's mystic technique required a fixed amount of energy, which was just enough to draw out 50 to 60% of his energy. If he used his full strength, it would be 90% of his energy. After using it, there wouldn't be much energy left. At this moment, he didn't need to use such a powerful attack to deal with a dying person. It was just like venting, even if it used up half of his energy. Rumble! In the sky, a huge energy palm descended from the sky. The palm was like white jade as it gently patted down. The land that was already in a mess suddenly rumbled, as if there was an earthquake. Huge cracks spread across the land like a spiderweb. Under this palm, even the space was rapidly collapsing. Terrifying gales left obvious traces in the space. Wherever it passed, the space would shatter. Such a terrifying power caused everyone's expression to tremble. They quickly fled, leaving only Yin Nuoxing in the area covered by the palm. When Yin Nuoxing raised his head and saw the white jade palm descending with destructive power, a divine light blossomed in his eyes. He took the elemental sword with his left hand and clenched his right hand into a fist. Arrays that were thousands of feet in size appeared with his right fist as the center. Then, mysterious runes rapidly condensed on the tip of his fist. The crushing fist caused his strength to increase exponentially. Then, his fist carried the power to tear the space apart and went against the heavens. Several arrays collapsed at the same time, and the power that erupted merged into his fist. It released a power that was close to 10,000 times stronger, causing the heavens and earth to lose their color. Boom! Both the fist and palm were tens of thousands of feet in size. When everyone saw the terrifying power that was about to collide, they sucked in a breath of cold air and retreated with all their might. The space was definitely going to collapse. However, things went beyond everyone's expectations. Just as the fist and palm were about to collide, the jade-white palm trembled. Then, it abruptly disappeared, leaving behind the fist that soared into the sky. Finally, it quietly disappeared. A cold light blossomed in Yun Nuoxing's eyes. He pointed his swords at the space. After a while, he seemed to have sensed something and sneered. He looked at the empty sky and said, "Do you think that I can't find you just because you're hiding?" Everyone looked at the space, but did not see anything. However, the Demon Clan experts' expressions changed, and their voices were somewhat shocked. Why are you here?" The Demon Clan experts reacted and hurriedly cupped their hands and bowed. There was a trace of respect in their eyes. The Human Clan experts could not help but be stunned. These were all experts of a younger generation of the Demon Clan. At this moment, they actually, under the watchful gazes of the crowd, a space vortex suddenly appeared in the space. After a while, a slender and alluring figure slowly emerged from the space vortex. Then, she appeared under the sky. The moonlight sprinkled down and seemed to cover her with a layer of silver gauze. The slender girl was wearing a moon-white long robe. Her snow-white hair sparkled in the moonlight and slid down her shoulders to her buttocks. In this silent world, she gently lifted her head and revealed an elegant and delicate face. She had bright eyes and white teeth. Her slender eyebrows were curved like crescent moons. There was a crescent mark between her eyebrows, which gave her a very special charm. She was like a moon girl, descending from the moonlight accompanied by specks of starlight. She walked forward with graceful steps, and on her jade neck hung a crescent moon pendant strung with silver beads. Under the reflection of the moonlight, it shone brightly, making her jade-like, beautiful face seem even more lustrous and fair. The moon god race's goddess. The Demon Clan people could not help but murmur. The moon god race was one of the demon clans. The race once had a god spirit class elite. This race had a god spirit blood pulse, but not all of them had a god spirit blood pulse. Back in the day, the direct descendants of the god spirit had a complete god spirit blood pulse. It was passed down from generation to generation. Perhaps there was only one god spirit blood pulse back in the day. Now, there were dozens of god spirit blood pulses. Generation after generation, the god spirit blood pulse mortal blood was modified into a god spirit blood pulse. Conversely, the mortal blood kept diluting the original god spirit blood pulse power. It kept diluting. In the end, no one knew how many generations later the god spirit blood pulse power would not be left. It would only become a blood pulse that was a little higher than an ordinary blood pulse. However, occasionally there would be a phenomenon similar to atavism. Among the descendants, there would be people with the first generation of god spirit blood pulse. Now, the complete god spirit blood pulse had appeared in the goddess. The suppression from the blood pulse made the Yao people's bodies tense. The moon god race. Yun Nuoxing squinted his eyes. He was silent for a while. He then opened his mouth and said, "Huh?" The moon god race goddess was clearly shocked. Her silver eyes looked confused. She did not understand what he had said. She tilted her head. After a while, she bowed elegantly to Yun Nuoxing and smiled. "I am Yu Ying of the moon god race. This is the first time we have met. I am the human race's Na Ling godly body." Yun Nuoxing glanced at her. He was deep in thought. Not all god spirit blood pulses can speak the language of the mythological era. What he had just said was the language of the mythological era. This was a question he wanted to verify in this life. He wanted to verify the relationship between the mythological era and the god spirit blood pulses. As for when he was still quarter moon, he did not have the time to research this. In the very ancient era, no one knew the language of the mythological era. The things of that era had disappeared too thoroughly. Almost nothing was left, let alone a language. Then, I should be able to confirm it. But if I want to be more certain, I will have to find a blood pulse of that level. That is a bit difficult. In the soul world, Little White yawned and said, the God Spirit bloodline doesn't necessarily know the language of the mythological era. Perhaps it is the memory fragments of the Sky God bloodline, the ancient Sky God bloodline. This girl who just came out doesn't seem to understand. She doesn't seem to be awakening this language. Yin Nuashing nodded subtly. Then he glanced at the snow-white figure and said, Na Ling, godly body. Yin Nuashing, I'm not a human. What do you want to say? Yin Nuashing was very suspicious of this God King elite who suddenly jumped out and played him. He did not know what she wanted to do by suddenly appearing. Nothing. I just wanted to talk to you. I do not plan to fight with you. I still want to live for a few more years. Ewing smiled and stroked her snow-white hair. Mei Mao glanced at the abyss below and said meaningfully. The hearts of the shifters jumped. They knew what this meant. It meant that this goddess of the Moon God clan also admitted that she was not as strong as Na Ling godly body. However, they did not say anything. Instead, they respectfully stepped back and made a large space. In the shifters, it was clear that Yuing was also a divine beast. As for the strength of her bloodline, Yin Nuashing sensed it slightly. It was probably weaker than Bing Air. After all, the latter was smashed with a lot of fairy items before she was born. The bloodline that was created was not something that ordinary divine beasts could compare with. If she was not as strong as Bing Air, she would not be as strong as Foam, and Little White. The two of them were one of the orthodox four spirits of heaven and earth. Talk. Yin Nuashing looked confused. He looked at the group of people around him who looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Then he sighed and said, if you have something to say, just say it. As you can see, this is not a good place to talk. All right. Ewing curled her lips. Mei Mao glanced at the barrier behind him. She blinked and said, I want to invite the divine dragon behind you to be a guest in the shifter's realm. Yin Nuashing's eyes immediately narrowed. He took a deep breath, and the aura around his body suddenly increased. It was so strong that it was enough to make the space between heaven and earth tremble. Faintly, there was a murderous aura. This aura seemed to have changed completely. It shocked everyone and made them vigilant, as if they were facing a great enemy. Don't show such a scary expression. I don't want to be your enemy, Ewing said pitifully. Then she laughed softly. I don't mean to steal you. I just want to invite you to be a guest in the Moon God clan. If you come with us, our clan will be very happy. We will treat you as guests of honor. Not all shifters are hostile to the human clan. In the ancient times, or rather, in this era, there are also some shifters who are on good terms with the human clan. Hearing this, Yin Nuashing gradually withdrew his darkening aura. He looked at her indifferently and said, the world is about to fall into chaos. Are you trying to rope in helpers in advance? Ewing smiled sweetly and did not comment. Yin Nuashing also did not change his expression. She was right. After all, the Nine Gods Hall had a long history of friendship with the Blazing Fire Dragon, the Shining Dragon clan. It was also because of him. In the ancient times, he felt that the Shifter's realm might be easier to get along with than the human clan. The matter of the 12-star palaces had lowered his opinion of the various aspects of the human clan. However, this was only a minority. It was also because it was only a minority that he did not completely distort his view of the human clan. Unfortunately, the force I belong to can support itself even without other people, Yin Nuashing said indifferently. Then he raised his hand and took out something from his pendant. He threw it to Yuing and said, on the contrary, if you want to come and play, we welcome you. Yuing raised her eyebrows and looked at the colorful object with some confusion. After hesitating for a moment, she waved her hand and caught the object. When she opened it, her expression changed. What appeared in her hand was a square token. It was clearly not a luxurious and special token like Yin Nuashing's, but a token that symbolized status and representation. Naturally, it represented the Nine Gods Hall. You are the divine son of the Nine Gods Hall? This time, It was Yu Ying's turn to be surprised. This kind of colorful token could only be owned by people of extremely high status in the Nine Gods Hall. It was no wonder that she would think that Yun Nuoxing was the divine son of the Nine Gods Hall. In fact, the latter was the young lord of the Nine Gods Hall. There was a slight difference. As for the realm of the gods, it was at least the strongest force of the human race on the surface. The monster realm and demon realm knew it very well. They either listed it as their number one enemy or as a force to avoid. Yu Ying was very surprised because the receptive spirit godly body did not belong to any force on the surface. No one would have thought that he would silently join the Nine Gods Hall and become the divine son of the Nine Gods Hall. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes as a silent acknowledgement. He did not explain the situation in detail. The two of them communicated through voice transmission. Therefore, no one knew what they were talking about. Yu Ying rolled her eyes a few times. After a moment, she covered her mouth and giggled. Her smile could topple a city. Countless people were stunned by her smile. She did not look like a demon at all. There were no characteristics of the demon race on her body. She was completely in the form of a human. Okay, I will definitely pay a visit another day, Yu Ying said with a smile. Then, the space around her collapsed slightly. She bowed slightly and said, Then I will take my leave today. I won't disturb you anymore. Everyone, Yin Nuoxing, he suddenly felt that this girl should be very compatible with Chu Yingzhan. Chapter 955. The goddess of the moon god clan disappeared after appearing for a short while. No one knew what she and Yun Nuoxing talked about in secret. They only felt that it was a good conversation. However, this was only a small interlude. After the interlude, everything returned to normal. In a normal battle, rumble, the violent battle continued. Yin Nuoxing was surrounded by a large group of people and was exhausted from dealing with them. These people were all divine kings and even divine emperors. If there was only one of them, it would be fine. However, when there was a group of such experts and all of them were holding a mid-grade divine artifact, he had to raise his spirit and concentrate. Moreover, he only had less than half of his strength left. He did not dare to use a large-scale destructive profound art. It seemed like there was someone here who had a high-grade divine artifact that focused on defense. If his full-strength attack was blocked, he would fall into an abnormally difficult and bitter battle. He couldn't retreat. Behind him was the barrier. His family was also in a deep state of cultivation. He had at least hold on until they were in good condition. Damn it, didn't you all run away when you heard my name before? Why are you all bothering me now? Yin Nuoxing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and felt bitter in his heart as he slapped away a divine emperor who had rushed forward to fight him. Spiritual divine body. Where is your divine artifact? Why don't you take it out? Are you looking down on us? A human expert with a grade 6 divine Bao took advantage of the chaos to shoot an arrow. He had no choice but to use his mind to defend himself. This wasn't a simple energy attack. He couldn't absorb it. Bah, I don't even need a divine artifact to deal with scum like you. Yin Nuoxing licked his lips and said coldly as he slashed the 1,000 feet long arrow into two with his sword. Yin Nuoxing felt bitter in his heart. What he didn't tell Xian and the others was that although he could use a divine artifact with the divine pattern tree temporarily removed from his body, without the divine pattern tree, he couldn't exert more power than the divine artifact as before. If an ordinary person used a divine artifact, they could only exert 60% of the power. If it was a natal divine artifact, they could only exert 80% of the power. As for the spiritual divine body, he could exert 2 or even 3 times the power of a divine artifact. This was a further enhancement after reaching the small success level. His understanding of the divine artifact had reached a higher level. He could also activate the hidden external energy circuit and exert more power than a divine artifact. Before reaching the small success level, he could only exert 100% of the power of a divine artifact. Now, without the divine pattern tree, he could only exert 90% of the power. However, the consumption of energy had increased tremendously. If he could kill all of them at once, it would be fine. Some of them were even sneakily hiding in the back and shooting arrows. Buzz! A huge talisman flew towards him. Yin Nuashin glanced at it. The power of his eyes allowed him to analyze that it was a sealing talisman. However, he wasn't afraid and still broke it with a single slash. The power of the fusion of the 12 elements isn't something that you can withstand. Yin Nuashing muttered in his heart. He raised his spirits and hurriedly retreated, dodging several arrows that were flying towards him. Between heaven and earth, huge spell matrices suddenly appeared and enveloped this part of heaven and earth. Several spell matrices that were thousands of feet in size enveloped Yun Nua planet. There was no one else in this area. He was just wondering why no one rushed forward. It turned out that there was a backup plan. Take this. You can go to hell and regret your arrogance. The people who used the combined attack array roared. The seals in their hands changed violently. The arrays started to rotate uniformly. Waves of terrifying energy crazily condensed within them. This is a divine grade 6th level array formed by a divine artifact. Your divine body's devouring power is useless. It's your honor to die here. That person roared angrily. The other 4 divine kings clapped their hands together, and a shout spread through the sky. Myriad tribulation burning sky array. It was as if thousands of tribulations had fallen from the sky and erupted from several arrays. The powerful energy even triggered the violent power of heaven and earth in the yin-yang world. Then huge fist and palm prints with the power of various elements burst out from it. The sea of fire burned the sky, and the thunderbolts were powerful. The energy light dyed the place white and almost blinded everyone's eyes. In the array in the sky, there was a huge thunderbolt spear that cut through the sky and stabbed down. Rumble! Thousands of kinds of energy exploded in an instant. The bright and dazzling energy light was like a scorching sun in the sky. The extremely powerful light made the moon in the sky lose its luster. The entire yin-yang world dimmed. The space collapsed. A huge energy storm that was thousands of feet in size swept out from it, tilting the violent power in all directions. How is it? Is he dead? A group of people retreated far away. They watched the raging energy storm destroy the arrays. Feeling the powerful energy, their pupils narrowed slightly. Some people could not help but ask. The divine kings who worked together to form the combined attack array were panting. In front of them, there was a thing that was the size of a head. It was shaped like a disc, emitting powerful energy. However, at this time, it also quieted down quietly. Those people were also dispirited. Launching such a powerful attack had consumed all their strength. Our sex formation disc can be used to launch and strengthen a combined attack formation. A few of us have used it to defeat a heavenly god. The formation disc doesn't release a pure energy attack. No matter how strong the receiving spirit godly body is, it will definitely fall. The person who seemed to be the leader wiped his sweat and sneered. "Oh, you are so sure that I will die." In the storm, a faint laughter suddenly rang out, causing the person's expression to turn sluggish. A look of horror flashed across his eyes. Everyone turned their gazes in disbelief and looked at the raging energy storm. Even if they were to be sucked into the energy storm, they would die instantly. Could it be that the divine body of Nalin click? A snap of a finger resounded through the space. The sound was very abrupt. It should have been obliterated by the raging noise of the energy storm. However, the snap of a finger was clearly heard by everyone. Then, everyone saw the energy storm suddenly tremble and dissipate in an extremely strange manner. It was as if a tornado was torn into two by 2 huge hands. After the energy storm disappeared, the scene that followed appeared before everyone's eyes. Yin Nuashing still had half a head of white hair. His 6 colorful wings shone brightly. His aura had not recovered to its peak. Obviously, he did not recover his strength with the help of the energy storm. Instead, he took it head-on. God, this guy is not human at all. Everyone was so shocked that their faces were distorted. They gritted their teeth, and their faces were pained. Why couldn't this guy be killed? The Divine King experts who worked together to cast the array were shocked. They had never experienced a situation where the arrayed disc failed. They immediately turned around and left. The divine body of Na Ling was too abnormal. That pair of eyes that were filled with divine light stared straight at them, treating them as prey. Bang! A violent sound of air exploding suddenly erupted in the crowd. All they saw was a mass of energy crazily converging and then exploding in an instant. Moreover, that massive energy had exploded at the same time as the absorption. The terrifying energy shock wave shook everyone, causing them to stagger and fly backwards. As for the few array masters who were at the center of the energy shock wave, they were directly shaken to death. The light of the energy explosion disappeared. Yin Nuoxing raised his head and retracted his palm. His eyes that were filled with the will of reincarnation stared at everyone. Black energy was surging around his body. He smiled evilly and said, "Who's next?" Everyone was horrified and broke out in cold sweat. However, no one retreated immediately. A group of people approached Yin Nuoxing carefully. The people here were all young experts of the human race and the demon race. Some of them were even elites among the experts. How could they be allowed to retreat without a fight? Kill! It was unknown who roared. Then, everyone attacked at the same time, as if they had a tacit understanding. All kinds of divine weapons and divine arts rushed towards Yin Nuoxing with overwhelming momentum. Some of them retreated immediately. Their hands formed seals with lightning speed. The energy in their bodies was surging. Obviously, they were preparing for a big killer move. Moreover, it was a killer move with all their strength. Kill! Yin Nuoxing also roared. His evil smile suddenly turned into a twisted and ferocious face. A trace of black energy flashed across his colorful eyes and surged out with extremely chaotic and violent energy. He activated the dark shadow world directly. The black energy covered an area of 10,000 feet around him. This was a chaotic zone without any rules. He could release energy at the level of the rules of destruction. When others fell into this zone, they would be as weak as paper. A terrifying battle broke out again. Thousands of experts were holding divine weapons. Every move they made released the strongest energy. This was a battle of life and death. When these people attacked with all their strength, even the gods would feel their scalps tingling. Many people here had the strength to fight against those of a higher level or even a higher level. However, they had never seen such an abnormal person. Kill! 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 Yin Nuoxing's eyes turned red. The dark shadow world continued to expand. The energy tide surged towards this place. Anyone who fell into the dark shadow world would be crushed by the huge energy that came from countless directions. Those powerful divine weapons and energy were also constantly attacking his domain, causing the dark shadow world to shake. Raging Flames Immortal, Demon Emperor Fist, powerful profound arts and divine arts surged with terrifying power. Everyone fought until their eyes turned red. One of them directly passed through the dark shadow realm and fiercely slapped Yin Nuoxing's six-winged Yin Nuoxing, causing him to stagger and his domain to become unstable. However, that person was also smashed into pieces by his backhand. Stars, fall of thousands of stars. Yin Nuoxing roared. In the dark shadow world, thousands of starlight suddenly surged out. It was like a star field. Then, starlight crazily condensed in the sky and descended. The power of these stars was only 10 feet in size. However, the attacks were very concentrated. It was as if thousands of stars were gathering their light at the same time. The starlight pillars fell like raindrops. Kill! Bang! A violent explosion ignited terrifying energy sparks. The violent energy blasted Yin Nuoxing's dark shadow world into pieces. He also spat out a mouthful of blood. Everyone knew that his domain was invincible. They did not hesitate to detonate their mid-tier divine artifacts to break through his domain. After being blasted out of the dark shadow world, Yin Nuoxing's body shot out like an arrow. However, as he flew out, he made up his mind and snapped his fingers. You blew up your divine artifacts. I'll destroy this place." The energy from the starlight gathered crazily on the ground and condensed into a huge array. The red-gold array exploded with extremely violent energy, causing everyone's pupils to shrink. Dark shadow, with a roar, dark flames that were tens of thousands of feet long shot up into the sky from the reddish-gold array like a pillar of fire. The chaotic and violent dark energy distorted the entire world, shattering the laws and space. Under the illumination of the chaotic light, even the moon was dimmed. Destroy. As the hoarse roar fell, a reddish-black light burst out from the array, replacing the black pillar of fire. Moreover, the reddish-black light continued to expand from a radius of 10,000 feet, expanding outwards. The chaotic and violent energy seemed to be able to overturn the heavens and earth. "I'm going to smash the entire starry sky on your heads." Yin Nuoxing's eyes erupted with an incomparably violent light. His hair was disheveled, and he looked like a madman. His hands formed seals that seemed like they were about to shatter space. A moment later, he ruthlessly smashed an obscure seal into space. He didn't care about whether there was anyone in that space or not, and suddenly launched a full-force attack. Star of destruction. In the starry sky, endless star power surged in from hundreds of millions of light-years away. In an instant, it all condensed in the sky, condensing into a huge blue and white ball of blazing energy that was thousands of kilometers wide. However, two-thirds of this energy ball was illusory and ethereal. Clearly, the person who had unleashed this destructive energy ball was already nearing the end of his life. However, even though more than half of its size was illusory, the gigantic ball of energy still began to collapse in an instant. Then, in an instant, the gigantic ball of energy transformed into a 10,000-mile-long, bluish-white energy beam that descended upon the realm of the gods like a heavenly punishment. The gigantic beam of light descended with the power of the entire starry sky, causing the entire realm of the gods to tremble slightly. The blue-white pillar of starlight connected heaven and earth like a huge astral beacon. Terrifying energy halos that were more than 10,000 miles long expanded from top to bottom and scattered on the ground. They turned into violent shock waves that pushed the ground into the distance like waves. The entire Yin-Yang world was almost submerged in the huge and violent pillar of starlight. It was like an eternal light, causing countless people to tremble in fear. The pillar of starlight only lasted for a short 5 seconds. Yin Nuoxing didn't have the power to maintain its existence at all. In just a short while, his power was almost exhausted. The pillar of starlight suddenly disappeared, leaving behind a flattened ground. The space and ground of the Yin-Yang world were too hard. This huge and destructive energy only caused it to sink a few hundred meters, but it didn't shatter. It still retained its approximate size. Huff! Huff! In the sky, Yin Nuoxing was exhausted. His long, colorful hair had turned pale, and his 6 wings drooped weakly. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His eyes were listless as he looked at the ground below. Sweat dripped down like a stream. His weak soul power spread out with some trembling. When he sensed that there was no more life below, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Annihilated, clap, clap. The crisp sound of applause rang out in the sky. It was extremely sudden and was especially ear-piercing in the silent sky. It caused Yin Nuoxing to fiercely inhale half a breath of air, as if he was twitching. He turned his gaze with difficulty and saw that not far away, there were a few people standing in the air, looking at him with various gazes. As expected of the spiritual, godly body, he fought against the young experts of 2 clans alone and annihilated nearly 10,000 experts, including many young supremes. He's extremely powerful. The man kept clapping with a warm smile on his face. What he said was true. The opening of the Yin-Yang world had attracted countless young experts. Many of the people gathered here today were super experts of the younger generation, even young supremes. For example, Spirit Emperor Kuan Yuan. After besieging him for such a long time and holding many divine weapons, he still couldn't kill the spiritual godly body. He even killed countless of them. This was really a shocking and brilliant battle record. Yin Nuoxing swallowed his saliva with difficulty. His eyes were slightly blurred. He took a deep breath and raised his spirits. There were still people here. Could it be that these people had been here from the beginning to the end? It's a pity that you were so focused on the battle that you didn't notice that someone was watching from the beginning to the end. The man said with a smile. He glanced faintly at the energy barrier that had sunk a few hundred meters along with the ground. As Yin Nuoxing exhausted his strength, the Imperial God diagram and those barriers also dimmed a little. Sure enough, the person who had been lurking at the back from the beginning to the end and reaped the benefits. Yin Nuoxing gasped for breath. He trembled as he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His whole body was full of exhaustion. Whoosh! Suddenly, the sound of rushing wind sounded in the surroundings, causing Yin Nuoxing to gasp for breath and feel a little annoyed. He knew it. How could there only be so few people gathered in the yin-yang world? However, there were too many people hiding in the distance to watch the show. At this time, the people who had gathered were a little scared. They had watched the whole battle. In the past, they didn't know much about the divine body, but now they knew that this guy was a freak among freaks. A person at the demigod level killed so many divine kings and divine emperors without using any divine artifacts. Yin Nuoxing was aggrieved. Being watched by a group of people so unscrupulously, he really wanted to take out his divine sword and slash these people. If it was a netherworld king expert, he would be beaten to death, right? Everyone was scared. Many of the divine artifacts that had just appeared were at the 6th level of the divine level. Although they weren't very lethal to the netherworld king experts, they could still wear down and cause damage. Moreover, there were thousands of them. They could wear down a netherworld king expert to death. A white shadow suddenly rushed up from below, startling everyone. They quickly became vigilant, worried that it was Yin Nuoxing's last move. They were afraid that he would struggle to kill another group of people. However, the white shadow was a white ball. It was extremely fast. It rushed into the sky in an instant and then appeared in front of Yin Nuoxing. With its back to him, it faced the crowd. It was the small beast, the mysterious small beast that had been chased around the yin-yang world for a long time. Woo-woo, woo-woo-woo. The small beast seemed to be very angry. It patted the void with its little paws in a human-like manner, just like a person patting a table. There was an angry expression on its cute little face, as if it was scolding these people for taking advantage of its precarious situation. Unfortunately, no one could understand its beast language. It ran here. The crowd was shocked. They had been looking for it in the yin-yang world for a long time. They didn't expect it to jump out by itself at this moment. Seeing that everyone was looking at it with evil intentions, the white round small beast trembled violently. Its fur stood on end, and cold sweat immediately ran down its face. It whined sadly and hurriedly ran to Yin Nuoxing's side. It grabbed his clothes and ran to the top of his head, curling up into a ball. Its 2 cat ears were folded. Everyone was stunned and puzzled. Yin Nuoxing was also dumbfounded. What was this little guy doing here? Was it here to act cute? Was it planning to kill everyone here with its cuteness? At this moment, Xiao Xian, who had been nestled on his neck, suddenly stood up. Then, while Yin Nuoxing wasn't paying attention, she rushed to the top of his head. She swung her 6 big tails and slapped the round small beast down. Her big agile tail stared at it unkindly, and then her tail stood up. Woo-woo-woo. It was as if she was saying that this was her territory. Woo-woo. The round white small beast looked at Xiao Xian gravely. Its 2 small eyes were teary, listless, and its long tail drooped down. It was very cute. Everyone was speechless. What were these 2 little guys doing here? Didn't they know how to read the atmosphere? He hugged Xiao Xian in his arms and rubbed her little head. The white small beast seized the opportunity and jumped onto Yin Nuoxing's head, burying its head. Yin Nuoxing ignored it. Although he didn't know what this round small beast was, it seemed that many people were here for it. However, He couldn't even protect himself at this time. He didn't know why this small beast came to him. If he was hunted all the time, wouldn't it be better to slip away in the chaos just now? Now that it ran out, it was like walking into a trap. Spiritual, godly physique, put down the demonic beast on your head, and we can still let you die a quick death. Someone shouted at Yin Nuashing fearlessly, taking advantage of the fact that there were many people here. Yin Nuashing looked up. A sharp divine light shone from his eyes, piercing that person's eyes. His heart twitched, and he quickly shrank back. You want to kill me? Yin Nuashing's smile was extremely bright. Even though he was exhausted and seriously injured by the explosion of the divine weapon, he still stood upright in the sky. Come, I'm standing right here. You want to try and kill me? That dazzling smile was full of bewitchment, and people didn't dare to act rashly. You're not coming? Yin Nuashing sneered. He hugged Xiao Xian with his left hand, and a netherworld ruined sword slowly appeared in his right hand. If you're not coming, then let me. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.